Chapter 529. How long did I sleep? Gunyanji hugged her knees as she sat on the bed and wrapped a thin blanket around herself. Her eyes were still a bit sleepy. Not too long, right? Hua Xiaoheng looked at his watch and replied dryly, 1 day and 1 night. Not too long indeed. Her experience in Barbados had been too stressful. She had also been hit by the electric arcs in the Blue Hole's waters. It had caused some damage to her body, and flying for more than 10 hours was too draining. That was why she was so lethargic after returning. Sleep was also one of the body's self-healing functions. Chunlai came to see Gunyanji and said she was fine. She had just fallen asleep, so Hua Xiaoheng didn't ask anyone to wake her up. Gunyanji rubbed her eyes and mumbled, "It's only been 1 day and 1 night." She was getting more and more daring to complain in front of Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng curled his lips and stood up. "Clean up first. I have a meeting today. Your father has already been admitted to the military's general hospital. Chunlai is taking care of him. If you want to see him, you can look for Chunlai or Dr. Yi." Gunyanji froze. She put down her hand and looked at Hua Xiaoheng for a while. "Hua Xiao, you're leaving already?" "Yeah, I still have a meeting in the morning." Hua Xiaoheng was worried about her, so he came to see her and wake her up. Gunyanji's eyes showed a hint of reluctance to part, but she didn't say it out loud. She only looked at Hua Xiaoheng steadily. Hua Xiaoheng smiled and leaned forward to kiss her forehead. "Be a good girl. Get up and eat breakfast. We have to go to school soon." He left as soon as he finished speaking. He was clean and didn't show any reluctance. Gunyanji looked at Hua Xiaoheng's back as he left her bedroom step by step. He opened the door and finally heard the sound of the door closing. His back disappeared through the door. He left just like that. Gunyanji sat on the bed for a while and looked at her watch to see it was only 7 a.m. She slowly got up and went to the bathroom to shower. She came out to do a skin treatment on purpose. When she went down, Hua Xiaoheng was no longer in the dining room, just as she expected. Of course, it took her almost an hour to go downstairs. Zhao Yangzi was sitting in the dining room reading the news on his iPad. When he saw her come in, he put down the iPad and pointed to the seat across from him. He smiled and said, "Nyenji, have a seat. There's millet porridge, beef buns, fried dough sticks and noodles this morning. What would you like?" Gunyanji sat down across from him and took a fried dough stick. She cut it in half and ate it with the millet porridge. After eating for a while, she asked, "Has Hua Xiao left already?" "Yes, he left a long time ago. He left when he came downstairs." Zhao Yangzi picked up his iPad and continued to read the news. Without looking up, he said, "Nyenji, when do you plan to go to school?" "I'll see you off." "Why do you have to give it to me?" Gunyanji didn't understand. "Didn't Brother Fan always give it to me?" "Brother Fan took Hua Xiao to General Ji's place today. Big Xiong was busy and didn't come back, so I took him." Zhao Yangzi looked up at her and moved closer. "What's wrong? You don't trust Brother Zay's driving skills?" "No." Gunyanji chuckled and ate a few mouthfuls of fried dough stick. She finally couldn't help but ask, "Brother Zay, did you know that my passport and ID have been changed? So I used to use fake IDs." Zhao Yangzi heard a hint of dissatisfaction in her tone. He laughed guiltily and said, "No matter how you change them, your name is the same. No one will get it mixed up." "You can't say that." Gunyanji frowned at Zhao Yangzi and tapped her slender fingers on the table. "My ID number and passport number are all different. Feels like I've changed my identity. It's very uncomfortable, don't you know?" "Changed your identity?" Zhao Yangzi carefully tried to figure out what Gunyanji was thinking. "You mean you seem to be dissatisfied with your new identity?" "I'm not really dissatisfied." Gunyanji sighed and propped her head on her hand. She didn't have the appetite to eat anymore. "I just think that you should ask me first, right?" Zhao Yangzi was even more amused. The little girl who had grown up with them was now starting to become independent. It was amusing to think about it. Okay, it's not a big deal. It's just changing my ID." Zhao Yangzi didn't understand why Gunyanji was making such a big deal out of nothing. "Okay, there are a lot of things to do. Hurry up and eat. I'll take you to school after." "How many days of leave did you take? Won't the school make things difficult for you?" Gunyanji's thoughts turned to the school. She thought about it and said, "I don't think so. Professor He knows about it." Zhao Yangzi knew that He Jichu had saved his life, so he had to make a special trip to thank him. "Okay, I'll go with you and thank Professor He," Zhao Yangzi said as he showed Gunyanji a bag of gifts he had prepared. It was a gift bag he had bought at the mall. There were flowers, fruits, and a low-key but luxurious gold pen. Gunyanji gasped and caressed the gold pen. "Brother Zay, you're so generous. This gold pen must be worth a lot." Zhao Yangzi knocked her head. Compared to your brother Zay's life, this gold pen is nothing. That's true. Gu Nianji nodded and said sincerely, Brother Zay, it's so good to see you're okay. Zhao Yangzi teased her for a long time but didn't mention thanking her for saving his life. He had wanted to see her act coquettishly and ask for a gift from him, but Gu Nianji didn't think about it at all. Zhao Yangzi was embarrassed. He took out another paper bag from under the table and handed it to her. Here, your brother Zay's life is really precious, so Nianji, your savior, should also give you a big gift to thank. Oh. I have one too. Gu Nianji was surprised and overjoyed. She didn't know where to put her hands. Her manga-like big eyes curved into two crescent moons, and her long eyelashes formed two soul-stirring arcs on her fair face. Her red lips formed a beautiful curve and her smile bloomed. She was even more alluring than the most gorgeous begonia in spring. Of course you have one. Zhao Yangzi shook his head and reached out to ruffle Gu Nianji's hair. Nianji, you're so silly. Did you forget that you're my true savior? Me? Gu Nianji waved her hands. Brother Zay, don't feel pressured. You went to Barbados because of me. It's only right and proper for me to save you. Don't think of me as your savior. I'll be so ashamed. Nianji. Zhao Yangzi wanted to say that they would go to Barbados to get Gu Xiangwen back regardless of Gu Nianji's existence. But wouldn't that be too cruel? Zhao Yangzi changed his words. Nianji, going to Barbados was half for you and half for our mission. It's not right and proper for you to save me, and I can't take it for granted. So, please accept my gift of thanks. Otherwise, I'll be the one who will feel uncomfortable. Hearing Zhao Yangzi's words, Gu Nianji accepted the small paper bag and took out a small red velvet brocade box. Oh, what's this? This brocade box is so cute. Gu Nianji looked at the gift in her hands with delight. Women naturally had no resistance to delicate little things. Won't you know once you open it? Zhao Yangzi crossed his arms and looked at Gu Nianji's happy expression with satisfaction. He was very confident in Bai Yueran's taste. This gift was suggested by Bai Yueran when she came to visit him and heard that he wanted to buy a gift for Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji opened the brocade box and saw a Wuxia 5-flower necklace inside. Unlike the jeweled flowers Hua Xiaoheng had bought for her before, this one was completely encrusted with diamonds. The diamonds weren't big, but the particles were full and clear. They were very transparent and inlaid into 5 small flowers. At first glance, it didn't look like much, but after a second glance, it was impossible to look away. This was probably what it felt like to be low-key and luxurious. Gu Nianji clicked her tongue. Brother Zay, you're rich? Van Cleef and Arpels 5-flower diamond necklace isn't cheap. It was more than 3 times more expensive than the 5-flower necklace Hua Xiaoheng had bought for her. She was very familiar with Van Cleef and Arpels jewelry. However, the necklace Hua Xiaoheng had bought was suitable for young girls. The one Zhao Yangzi had bought was more suitable for mature women. I told you your brother Zay is rich. Zhao Yangzi put down his arms and leaned forward to look at Gu Nianji. He thanked her solemnly again. Nianji, thank you so much. When I was at the bottom of the Blue Hole's waters, I was really prepared to die. But who doesn't want to live? You saved me and gave me another chance to live. What's this little bit of money? I can even give you my life. Gu Nianji laughed and waved her hands. I'll take the necklace. I'll take it, okay? Brother Zay, don't make it sound so serious. You're scaring me. Hee hee, you wouldn't have taken it if I didn't say that. Zhao Yangzi stood up. Let's go. I'll take you to school. Gu Nianji had left school in a hurry and had only brought her small bag. Her bag and suitcase were all in the dormitory, so it was convenient to only bring her small bag back. The two of them got into Zhao Yangzi's car and drove to the south gate of B University. At the same time, a private plane slowly landed at the imperial capital airport. Gu Yanran sat in her private plane and looked at the misty morning at the imperial capital airport through the window. Her expression was a bit blank. She had stayed in Barbados for an extra day and specifically looked for her and Gu Nianji's family doctor and dentist to investigate the dental models and blood samples. The doctors all confirmed that the data provided by Hua Xiaoheng was real and exactly the same as their test results. So the Gu Nianji in the Huaxia Empire was really her sister? But she had clearly gone out to sea 7 years ago. How did she go to the Huaxia Empire now? Gu Yanran held a photo of Gu Nianji when she was young and flipped it over. It really didn't look anything like her now. Miss Gu, you can enter now. Her newly hired housekeeper was a plump British woman in her 50s. She had been attending a housekeeper's school and came from a family of housekeepers. Gu Yanran had spent a lot of effort to hire her. She had paid double the market price to get her to sign the contract. Gu Yanran stood up and smiled at the housekeeper. Thank you, Mrs. James. Mrs. James also smiled. You're welcome, Miss Gu. Please. They alighted from their private plane and went through the customs procedures. Then they got into the car to pick up Gu Yanran and went to the villa Gu Yanran had bought. Gu Nianji arrived at school and first went to see He Jichu with Zhao Liangzi to cancel her leave. You're back? He Jichu looked at Gu Nianji carefully. Are you tired? Do you want to take a few more days off? No need, no need. Gu Nianji quickly waved her hands. I've had enough. Zhao Liangzi handed over his gift and said sincerely, Professor He, thank you for saving my life in Barbados. It's just a small gift. I hope you'll accept it. He Jichu nodded and directly ordered Gu Nianji, Nianji, take it and put it in my room. Gu Nianji grunted and said, Professor He, do I have to do this too? You're my teaching assistant. My only teaching assistant. If you don't do this, who will? He Jichu's tone was matter-of-fact. His shimmering, sultry eyes were calm, and his cool voice sounded distant. Fine, you win. Gu Nianji grumpily accepted Zhao Liangzi's gift and carried it to He Jichu's room to put it there. Zhao Liangzi chatted with He Jichu for a while more before saying to the room, Nianji, I'm leaving now. Call me if you need anything. Gu Nianji quickly walked out to see that Zhao Liangzi had already left. She couldn't help but stomp her feet. Why are you leaving so fast? I still have things to ask him. What do you want to ask? He Jichu's tone was much gentler now that there were no outsiders around. Is your body really fine? No. Gu Nianji spun around in front of He Jichu. Everything is fine. I slept for a day and night and all my injuries are healed. But she looked at He Jichu and felt that she should tell him about this. After all, he was her instructor and all the IDs registered at school had to be changed. So she told him, my passport and ID have been changed. I'm now a naturalized citizen of the Wuxia Empire. I'm an immigrant. I'm no longer the person I used to be. This was the first chapter of 3,700 words. She had to ask for monthly votes and recommendation votes. It was already the end of the month, so please vote for your monthly votes. There would be an extra chapter at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General at noon to get your red envelopes. Just click to the end of the chapter and read the password. Chapter 530. Gu Nianji's eyes were a little gloomy. Although it wasn't obvious, He Jichu, who had been paying close attention to her, noticed it. What's wrong? It's just changing your ID. Why are you so upset? He Jichu pointed to the kitchen. Go make me a cup of coffee. You drink coconut juice. There's some in the fridge. Gu Nianji froze. I'll make coffee? She was so shocked that she almost forgot about her new passport and ID. Yes, if you don't do it, who will? If the master needs something, the disciple will do it for him. Isn't that what you said? He Jichu slowly sat down and crossed his legs. He tilted his head to look at Gu Nianji with a half-smile. His elbows rested on the armrests of the single-seat sofa and his hands were clasped together on his crossed legs. His posture was relaxed and relaxed. It was that sentence again. Gu Nianji was speechless and could only go to the kitchen to make coffee for He Jichu. She thought it would take too long to grind the coffee beans, so she chose a bag of instant coffee and made a cup for He Jichu. She found a bottle of natural coconut juice in the fridge and brought it out on a tray. She placed the coffee on the coffee table in front of He Jichu and sipped the coconut juice. He Jichu took the coffee cup and only took a sip before putting it down. You didn't use coffee beans? No. Is the coffee I make not good? Gu Nianji pretended to be confused and didn't know where to look. It's not very good. He Jichu didn't drink instant coffee, but he didn't ask Gu Nianji to make another cup because he wanted to distract Gu Nianji, which was why he asked her to make coffee. It wasn't because he wanted it. I'm sorry. Gu Nianji giggled. Professor He's own coffee will definitely be better. So Professor He should make his own coffee from now on. Gu Nianji thought to herself, but of course she didn't dare say it out loud. He Jichu knew what she was thinking just by looking at her eyes. He pursed his lips and smiled. You don't want to make coffee for me? Of course not. Gu Nianji shrank back guiltily and drank the coconut juice. She didn't dare meet He Jichu's eyes. That's good. In the future, learn how to grind coffee beans to make coffee. He Jichu said seriously. Seeing that Gu Nianji was about to object, he added. It can be included in your usual grades and will account for 5%. Gu Nianji, who placed great importance on grades, immediately changed her attitude. She looked at He Jichu with an ingratiating smile and said, Professor He, don't worry. I'll definitely make you delicious freshly ground coffee next time. Yes, I'll wait and see. He Jichu cocked his head and naturally changed the topic. Did Gu Yanran object to you bringing Gu Xiangwen here? Of course we can hardly get out of Barbados. Gu Nianji said somewhat exaggeratedly. It was so dangerous at the time, but Hua Xiao got off the plane and spoke to Gu Yanran for a bit. She relented and agreed to let us take Gu Xiangwen, my father, away. Actually, Gu Nianji had gotten off the plane with Hua Xiaoheng. She had spoken more to Gu Yanran than Hua Xiaoheng had with Gu Yanran, but she gave all the credit to Hua Xiaoheng. Without him by her side as a stabilizing force, it would have been useless no matter how glib her tongue was. Gu Yanran was obviously the type of person who wouldn't be intimidated by words. Was that easy? He Jichu seemed to be in disbelief. He looked down and pondered for a moment. What happened after that? Gu Yanran didn't say anything? She accepted the fact that you were her sister right away? She didn't accept it right away. Gu Nianji's mood became even more depressed. She said she wanted to verify it herself. Professor He, you know that I want to find my identity because I don't want to be someone with an unknown background. She paused and didn't say why she didn't want to be someone with an unknown background. Because it would affect her relationship with Hua Xiaoheng. Zhao Liangzi and Yin Shixiang had both hinted to her that she wouldn't be able to pass the background check if she didn't have an unknown background. He Jichu didn't ask further. He was only thinking about Gu Yanran's reaction. He reminded Gu Nianji dryly, the Gu Yanran I know is very smart. She's resilient and won't give up until she achieves her goals. She's also flexible. In many situations she's able to turn adversity into prosperity. From a certain perspective the two of you are quite similar. So what if we're alike? We're not blood-related sisters. Gu Nianji spread her hands. That's the only thing that makes me happy about this. He Jichu snorted and turned his head. She probably thinks the same way. You two sisters coincide on this point again. Gu Nianji's lips twitched. Taking advantage of He Jichu's good mood, she quietly seized the opportunity. There are still a lot of things I don't understand. Can Professor He help me? Really? I'll say it again. If you can't believe everything I say, then what's the point of me saying it? He Jichu shook his head and looked at Gu Nianji gently. This will actually make it more difficult for you to regain your memories. But I just want to know. Gu Yanran said I disappeared in the Caribbean Sea near Barbados, but when I had my memories I found myself in the Wuxia Empire. To be precise, I was in a car that was about to explode. Gu Nianji had never been able to understand this question, so when she found out that Gu Yanran had a younger sister named Gu Nianji, she really didn't take it to heart because the places where the two disappeared and reappeared were too far apart. Gu Yanran probably thought the same, so she didn't investigate Gu Nianji. He Jichu was a bit lost in thought and didn't answer Gu Nianji's question. He propped his chin up with one hand and stared fixedly at a bookcase in the corner of the room. After a while he finally said, there must be something else we don't know. Then how did Professor He know I was in the Wuxia Empire and came here to find me? Gu Nianji finally asked quietly. This question had been in her mind for a long time, but she hadn't asked it. He Jichu came back to his senses. His shimmering almond-shaped eyes closely watched Gu Nianji's every move and every change in expression. He said, what misunderstanding do you have about the He family's power? But Hua Xiaoheng hid you really well. Even with the He family's power, it took several years to find a trace of you. Gu Nianji really didn't know what kind of power the He family had, but she had heard from Zhao Liangzi that the He family was the underground godfather of South American politics. So He Jichu should have his own way? If he started with the upper echelons of power, he could still find out about Gu Nianji because she wasn't following an ordinary person, but the powerful Hua Xiaoheng. Gu Nianji could only smile and say, I understand, but why didn't you just tell Gu Yanran? If we didn't have to pick up my father this time, you probably wouldn't have told me about my sisterly relationship with Gu Yanran, right? This is the second update. Let me remind you about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. Today is Monday, right? Recommendation votes are also very important. Also, the password red packet is for the Qidian reading app. Currently, other channels don't have it yet. Chapter 531. Gu Nianji had been rescued by Hua Xiaoheng at the age of 12 and had grown up with him in the Special Operations Forces base. She had no contact with the outside world. In the beginning, the Special Operations Forces hired private tutors for her to attend school. The tutors discovered that she was exceptionally smart and a genius, so they taught her very diligently. They only taught her for 2 years before she took the college entrance exam at the age of 14 and scored an unbelievable high score. She could attend any university in the country in any major. But at the time, the military was worried and refused to let her appear in public, so she did not leave the base university. Instead, she attended 2 years of online courses at a prestigious foreign university. Until 2 or 3 years ago, when Hua Xiaoheng and the others couldn't find out where Gu Nianji came from, they decided to let her go out and interact with society to see if there was a chance. If someone was looking for her, they would have a direction. After all, the Huaxia Empire's special operations forces were too well hidden, and Hua Xiaoheng was like an iron wall. People from the outside world couldn't get in at all. But it was different when Gu Nianji went out to university. No matter what, she finally returned to society from the iron wall, and returned to a place where people could interact with her. To not be separated from Hua Xiaoheng, Gu Nianji chose a university in C City so she could stay by his side. It wasn't until she graduated 6 months ago and became He Zhichu's graduate student that she left C City and came to the imperial capital. Fortunately, Hua Xiaoheng and the others also moved the Special Operations Forces headquarters to the imperial capital. Otherwise, they would have been separated for real. After Gu Nianji finished speaking, she kept a close eye on He Zhichu's expression. He Zhichu looked down at the coffee cup on the coffee table in front of him. His expression was like ice in winter, and she couldn't see anything. After a while, He Zhichu's eyelashes fluttered twice, and his clear voice slowly came out of his mouth. Like ice falling into spring water, Gu Nianji suddenly felt surreal. If I said that I had selfish motives, would you believe me? He Zhichu said dryly, his face still expressionless. He reached for the coffee cup but didn't drink it. He only gently turned it on the tray and made a soft porcelain sound. Gu Nianji fell silent and didn't dare to ask again. She had finally returned to a normal teacher-student relationship with He Zhichu. She didn't want to ruin it again and make things awkward for both of them. Oh, is that so? Looks like it's just a time difference. Gu Nianji finally managed to change the topic and didn't want to pursue it any further. He Zhichu breathed a sigh of relief. Gu Nianji's question was actually too sharp. He Zhichu didn't know how to answer her at first, so he could only reveal half of it. If she was willing to listen, he would strike while the iron was hot. Unfortunately, she wasn't willing to listen, so he wouldn't say it. It would be fine as long as she didn't dwell on this reason. A hint of a smile appeared on He Zhichu's cold face. It's good that you understand. By the way, you took a few days off. Have you finished the homework you missed? Gu Nianji grimaced at the mention of her homework. Professor He, can you give me a few more days? He Zhichu looked at her without speaking, his eyes dark. 2 days. 1 day. Gu Nianji didn't give up trying to bargain. He Zhichu finally nodded. 1 day. I'll give you 1 day to finish your homework. Also, you have to fulfill your duties as a teaching assistant. That's too much. How am I supposed to sleep? Gu Nianji wanted to scream, but she couldn't bear to give up being a teaching assistant because the salary was really high. Seeing her bank account accumulating every month, she felt a strange sense of satisfaction. Then how about you quit being a teaching assistant and I'll find someone else? He Zhichu was certain that Gu Nianji wouldn't give up the job, so he took a step back in order to advance. Gu Nianji objected as expected. She said seriously, Professor He, don't worry. I'll definitely finish my homework and do my job as a teaching assistant. Okay, I'll wait and see. He Zhichu finished the instant coffee Gu Nianji made for him in one gulp. It tasted terrible. He Zhichu put the coffee cup back on the coffee table with a look of disgust. Gu Nianji smiled sheepishly and stood up to say goodbye to He Zhichu. Professor He, I'll be going now. He Zhichu nodded and felt his phone vibrate. Taking it out, he saw it was Gu Yanran calling. He hung up nonchalantly and said to Gu Nianji, hurry up and finish your homework. Do your job as a teaching assistant. I'll check tomorrow. He Zhichu only answered Gu Yanran's call after Gu Nianji left. Mr. He, you asked me for the contact information of Nianji and my family doctor and dentist when we were young. Were you trying to confirm Nianji's identity? Gu Yanran asked bluntly over the phone, not beating around the bush at all. He Zhichu knew that Gu Yanran would ask him, so he agreed. Congratulations, you found your sister. Mr. He, you probably already knew, right? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Gu Yanran stood in front of the French windows in her villa, her emotions a mess. This matter was too inconceivable to her. She had been in a daze ever since she had verified it. Only later did she remember to call He Zhichu first. If she guessed correctly, He Zhichu was the reason why Hua Xiaoheng was able to obtain evidence to prove Gu Nianji's identity. That was because the records of the family doctor and dentist coincided with He Zhichu asking for the contact information of her family doctor and dentist not long ago. I didn't know much earlier. Just like you, I didn't even think she was your sister at first, He Zhichu said slowly. The smile on his lips wasn't genuine. Fortunately, Gu Yanran couldn't see it. She would definitely explode. Ijichu also walked to the window and looked down from the 28th floor. The people in cars passing by were like ants. He couldn't tell which one was Gu Nianji. He said dryly, "It wasn't until later that I thought I could use Nianji's childhood family doctor and dentist records to confirm it, that I asked you for the contact information." "Then it's a coincidence?" Gu Yanran held it in for a long time before saying, "Isn't this too much of a coincidence?" "It is. You have no choice but to believe it." Hijichu's smile had a hint of mockery. "So, Miss Gu, have you thought about taking your sister home?" "Home?" Gu Yanran paused. A trace of emotion flashed through her heart. She smiled slowly. "Now that it's confirmed that she's my sister, of course she has to go home. She's the daughter of the Gu family, of course she has to go back to the Gu family. Yes, she's already a citizen of the Wuxia Empire." Hijichu reminded her as if he wanted to see the world in chaos. "If your home is still in Barbados, I'm afraid she won't go back with you." Gu Yanran choked. "Got it. I'll talk to her first." Gu Yanran looked down at the photo in her hand in frustration. She walked back to put the photo back in the frame and carefully placed it in her YSL handbag. Gu Nianji returned to her dorm and saw Machichi sitting at the dining table eating as soon as she entered. Machichi froze for a second when she saw her come in. Then she let out an earth-shattering scream and pounced on Gu Nianji. She grabbed Gu Nianji's shoulders and looked her over. Laughing, she said, "Nianji, you still know to come back. They all said you transferred schools." "No way. It's only been a few days? How can this kind of rumor spread?" Gu Nianji tilted her head to look at Machichi with amusement. "Tell me who spread the rumor and I promise I won't beat them to death." "He? Beat them to death? You're so small you can't even beat me?" Machichi laughed and teased Gu Nianji for a while before letting her go. "Okay, I'll stop teasing you. You've been out for a few days, so you must be very tired. I can see that you've lost so much weight that your chin is pointy." Machichi's slender fingers tapped Gu Nianji's delicate chin. "See, I can't help but feel sorry for you. Come on, you only know how to use idioms." Gu Nianji snickered and pushed Machichi's hand away. "Hurry up and go to class. I have to catch up on my homework. Professor, he only gave me 1 day. I have to stay awake for 24 hours to finish everything." Okay, I won't bother you anymore." Machichi tactfully let go of her. "I'm going to the library. I'll treat you to dinner tonight?" "No, the day after tomorrow. I have to work like crazy today and tomorrow." Gu Nianji made an okay gesture. "Okay, I appreciate it." Machichi nodded. "Then I'll leave you to it. I'll be going now." Returning to her room to pack her bag, Machichi went to the library to study. Gu Nianji was alone in the dorm and began to catch up on her homework. Her phone rang a few times, but she heard it was a stranger's ringtone, so she didn't answer. In her phone, Xiaoheng and Hijichu both had their own exclusive ringtones. Other than them, other acquaintances had another ringtone that could be used. There was also a built-in ringtone that was prepared for strangers to call. She lost track of time when she was so busy that her stomach was rumbling. She was going to faint if she didn't eat, so she stood up to call for takeout. Glancing at her phone, she saw that there were a few missed calls from strangers. Her phone showed that it was already 9 o'clock at night. She had returned to the dorm at noon and had been working on her thesis without eating or drinking. 9 hours had passed in one go. No wonder her neck was cramping. Rubbing her neck, Gu Nianji looked at the stranger's number and pressed the button to return the call. Someone quickly picked up. "May I ask if this is Miss Gu Nianji?" The voice sounded familiar. Gu Nianji froze and asked tentatively, "May I ask who you are?" "I'm Gu Yanran, your sister. Have you forgotten already?" Gu Yanran's crisp laughter traveled over the phone. Gu Nianji sighed. Pressing her hand to her chest to calm herself, Gu Nianji adjusted her tone and asked calmly, "Miss Gu, you're already in the imperial capital?" The number displayed on the phone was a local number in the imperial capital, so she was certain that Gu Yanran had already arrived in the Wuxia Empire. It had only been 2 days? Gu Yanran nodded with a smile. "Yes, I just arrived this morning. I was anxious to find you, but why didn't you pick up?" This was the first chapter with 3,000 words. She had to request for monthly votes and recommendation votes. It was already the end of the month, so everyone should quickly vote for it. There would be an additional chapter at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General on the Qigyan app at noon to collect your red packets. You just had to click to the end of the chapter to read the password. Chapter 532. Oh, I didn't bring my phone with me just now, so I didn't hear it. I only saw it now that I'm using my phone. Gu Nianji's tone softened. She had mixed feelings about Gu Yanran. She didn't have a good impression of her in the beginning because of what Gu Yanran did to Huo Xiaoheng. Now, it wasn't exactly a good impression, but it wasn't as bad as it was in the beginning because she was Gu Nianji's sister. Whether she remembered her or not, they were legally related. Also, Gu Yanran didn't try to stop them from going to Barbados to bring Gu Xiangwen back to the Huaxia Empire as they had expected, so Gu Nianji couldn't feel bad about her. Gu Yanran also noticed the change in Gu Nianji's tone. The corners of her lips curled up slightly, and her long and narrow eyes squinted. She revealed a very charming smile. "Oh, I see. I thought you didn't want to pick up my call, really?" Gu Nianji laughed. "What did Miss Gu do to think I wouldn't pick up your call?" Gu Yanran choked on Gu Nianji's words and smiled. "Nianji, I'm more and more convinced that you're my sister now. You were always this good with words when you were young." Gu Nianji had clearly insulted Gu Yanran, but Gu Yanran made it sound like she had a way with words. Her tone was still as affectionate as ever, and she didn't take her insults seriously. Gu Nianji was really like a good sister. Gu Nianji held her phone and leaned against the wall by the dormitory window to look at the scenery outside. It was already past 9 o'clock at night, and the sky was completely dark. The street lamps were lit up, emitting a warm yellow light in the night sky. People walked to and fro downstairs, and everyone had a relaxed and happy smile on their faces. This situation infected Gu Nianji, and she couldn't help smiling. "Really? What was I like when I was young?" Gu Nianji asked softly, her tone even gentler. "Don't you remember? You were really smart and good with words when you were young. Mom and Dad and I all spoiled you." Gu Yanran picked up the photo with one hand and looked at the chubby little girl in the photo. She clicked her tongue. Such a big difference in appearance, she could only marvel at the wonders of the Creator. Gu Nianji couldn't remember how she had interacted with the Gu family and Gu Yanran when she was young. Gu Yanran's words echoed in her ears, but she couldn't piece together an image. "Nianji, why aren't you saying anything?" Gu Yanran waited for a while and couldn't help asking when Gu Nianji still didn't speak. When Gu Nianji snapped back to reality, her stomach was already growling. She smiled and said, "Oh, I'm a little hungry. I was just about to order takeout." "You haven't had dinner yet?" Gu Yanran looked at her watch. "It's already past 9. Why can't you take care of yourself?" Gu Nianji smiled sheepishly as she returned to her laptop. She held the mouse with one hand and clicked lightly. She simply went online to order food as she said, "I have a lot of homework today, so I had no choice but to rush the deadline." "Too much homework? Your mentor is Professor He, right? How could he give you so much homework?" Gu Yanran scolded her. "I'll go ask him." Gu Nianji quickly shook her head. "Miss Gu, I've been on leave recently, so I've accumulated homework. It's not because Professor He gave me too much homework." Gu Yanran nodded in understanding when she heard that it was because she was on leave. Her tone became even more amiable. "There's a reason for that. You should be understanding. Big sister will help you talk to him." Without waiting for Gu Nianji's response, she sighed and continued, "Poor Nianji. You've been living under someone else's roof all these years. You have a lot of grievances that you can't talk to anyone about, right? Don't be afraid. You have a big sister now. If there's anything you're unhappy about, you can tell Big Sister, and Big Sister will help you resolve it. If someone offends you and treats you badly, you can also tell Big Sister, and Big Sister will help you settle it." Gu Nianji only wanted to facepalm. She had been with Huo Xiaoheng for 6 to 7 years, but she had never felt living under someone else's roof. "Miss Gu, Gu Yanran didn't finish before Gu Yanran interrupted her again. "Nianji, you should call me Big Sister." Gu Nianji was speechless. The takeout I ordered is here. I'll talk to you later when I have time." Gu Nianji still couldn't call her Big Sister. She didn't want to continue talking, so she found an excuse to hang up. Gu Yanran looked at the phone screen and shook her head. She texted Gu Nianji, "I'll pick you up for dinner tomorrow." Gu Nianji's takeout really did arrive not long after she hung up. She quickly went downstairs to get it. She sat at the dining table in the living room and had just set it up when the front door lock clicked. Ma Chichi opened the door and came in. "Nianji? Are you having supper?" Ma Chichi was also carrying a box of takeout. "I bought paella. Do you want to eat together?" The paella had a strong flavor, and Gu Nianji didn't want to eat such strong food at night. She smiled and shook her head. "No, it's okay. You can eat by yourself. I have almond tofu, stir-fried cabbage, and a shiitake mushroom dish. Do you want to try?" They're all bland." Ma Chichi pouted. "I'll eat my paella." The two of them set the cutlery and sat across from each other to chat as they ate. Ma Qiqi actually wanted to ask where Gu Nianji had been for the past few days and what she had been doing. However, Gu Nianji didn't take the initiative to say it, so she couldn't ask directly. She could only beat around the bush. Did you finish your work? You left in such a hurry the other day that a teacher in the faculty even asked about you. Gu Nianji nodded. It was all right. I just went out to visit family. I'm fine now. Ma Qiqi saw that Gu Nianji still didn't want to talk about it, so she didn't press further. She began to talk about the faculty. The two of them happily finished their supper and returned to the way they were before Gu Nianji applied for leave. They were both in a good mood. Gu Nianji did some homework after returning to her room. Seeing that it was already 2 in the morning, she finally turned off the computer and went to the bathroom to wash up. After coming out, she couldn't sleep again. Sitting on the bed, she played with her phone and wondered if she should call Hua Xiaoheng. However, rubbing Hua Xiaoheng's name on her phone, she felt wronged. Hua Xiaoheng hadn't called her once the entire day. It wouldn't have mattered if he was out on a mission or had an emergency meeting. However, he was clearly just having a regular meeting today. In between meetings, he could have taken the opportunity to call her or send her a text, but he just didn't. She shouldn't take the initiative to call him again. Gu Nianji angrily turned off her phone and curled up in bed to sleep. At the same time, Hua Xiaoheng was still awake. He had just returned from the Military Supreme Council's regular meeting and had a lot of work on his hands. However, he was still thinking about the marriage application, so he took out his phone and called General Ji again. General Ji, have you seen my application? I have. The military is already discussing it. However, Xiaoheng, why are you applying without even settling your own family? General Ji whispered to him. Your father is against it. It was the second night, it was the last day of January. Relatives checked to see if there were any monthly votes in their accounts. If there were, and if they could still vote, then vote. Thank you. Chapter 533. Is that so? Hua Xiaoheng asked back, his tone still calm. What did he object to? Hua Xiaoheng's father, Hua Guanchen, was the director of the military's political department. Like General Ji, he was also a general. Although he didn't have as much power as General Ji, he was still one of the top 5 in the military's Supreme Council. I don't know the exact reason, but he voted against it in the first round when everyone was discussing it. General Ji rubbed his bald head helplessly. If someone else had voted against it, those people would have killed him. But your father is different. He's your father after all. Although your marriage needs the approval of the military will not be unreasonable and will not disregard your and your family's wishes. In other words, Hua Xiaoheng's father, Hua Guanchen's objection still had some weight to the military. Hua Xiaoheng gripped his phone. No matter what he thought, his face remained expressionless. He nodded at General Ji. Okay, sorry to disturb you. General Ji, you're still up so late? General Ji seemed to see Hua Xiaoheng's nonchalant expression and was very satisfied. Unmoved by material gains or personal losses, unflinching even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, and unblinking when an elk moved to his left. This was how a great general should behave. Why didn't you think about whether I was sleeping when you called just now? Now you're saying something like that. General Ji was both angry and amused as he grumbled over the phone. Hua Xiaoheng curled his lips, and his voice seemed to contain a smile. I know General Ji must be working overtime, that's why I dared to call at this time. I greeted you just now to urge you to sleep. What's wrong with that? Ah, you brat. You've said both good and bad things. I knew your eloquence was no worse than those people from the military's legal department. General Ji laughed heartily and chatted with Hua Xiaoheng for a bit before hanging up. Looking up at the clock on the wall, it was already 2:30 a.m. General Ji yawned and packed up the study, locked it in the safe and returned to his bedroom to sleep. Hua Xiaoheng didn't feel sleepy in the car. He was still holding the phone in his hand, one arm leaning on the bottom of the window. His eyes were dark as he looked out into the night. The road back to the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces was a little remote, and there were fewer and fewer cars as they walked. The streetlights on the side of the road formed a straight line outside the car, like an arrow pointing directly at the atrium of the heart. Hua Xiaoheng closed his eyes and raised a hand to cover his eyes. He didn't look at the night view outside and was already thinking about when to go home. Hua Jinyao hadn't been back to the Hua residence since Chinese New Year. Ever since the incident with head nurse Zhang, her grandfather, Hua Xuanong, had taken his granddaughter, Hua Jialan, to Europe for a break and had yet to return. His mother, Song Jining, was now the director of the Institute of High-Energy Physics. Every day she was obsessed with scientific research. Just like in the past, she could not wait to eat and live in the laboratory. As for his father, how long had it been since he last thought of his father? As Hua Xiaoheng thought about it, he rubbed his phone and tried to call his mother. As he expected, his mother did not sleep either. Song Jining was still in the laboratory reading her thesis. She wanted to make up for the 17 years that she had lost. Every day she had endless meetings and endless research papers. She had even set up a small, simple room for herself next to the laboratory with some daily necessities, clothes and shoes. She was really living in the laboratory. When her phone rang, she glanced at it and saw that it was her son, Hua Xiaoheng. She picked it up in surprise. "Xiaoheng? You're not asleep yet?" Hua Xiaoheng asked politely. "Are you still doing experiments?" "No, I'm reading my thesis." Song Jining smiled as she rubbed the yin-tang point between her eyebrows. "What about you? You're not asleep either?" Hua Xiaoheng smiled. "Of course I'm not asleep if I can make a call." After a pause he said, "I'll go see you. Is it convenient?" "Yes." Song Jining froze and immediately realized that her son had something to tell her. "Come over. I'll be in the office in the laboratory building. You know the room." Hua Xiaoheng nodded and hung up. He said to the driver, "Fan Jian, go to the Institute of High Energy Physics and buy some supper on the way." Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi did not say anything in the car. They watched as Fan Jian turned the steering wheel and drove to the Institute of High Energy Physics. An hour later, Hua Xiaoheng's car drove in through the metal gates of the Institute of High Energy Physics. Although it was past 3 in the morning, the guard at the gate still checked Hua Xiaoheng's car pass responsibly before letting them in. Song Jining looked at her watch. An hour had passed. Hua Xiaoheng should be here by now, right? She got up from her desk and opened the door. The long hallway was dark. Because the lights were voice-activated, the lights automatically went off when there was no sound. But soon, unhurried footsteps sounded in the hallway, and the lights in the hallway gradually turned on. A tall figure appeared in Song Jining's eyes. He strode over from the end of the hallway. The lights shone on his head, illuminating his facial features. He was incomparably handsome. Song Jining couldn't help but smile. She was still wearing the lab coat. Her hands were in the pockets of her lab coat as she watched Hua Xiaoheng walk over to her with a paper bag. "You shouldn't stay up late." Hua Xiaoheng walked over to Song Jining and carefully studied her expression. "This is freshly stewed cordyceps, Ganoderma and American ginseng soup. Have some for supper." Song Jining took the paper bag from Hua Xiaoheng's hands. She suddenly remembered more than 10 years ago before the accident happened. Hua Xiaoheng had also brought a box of cake to her lab to share it with her when he was still a teenager. She really had a guilty conscience towards this son of hers. When he was young, she was obsessed with her research career. She abandoned him and started working when she was 1 month old. Later, when he was a teenager, she was greatly traumatized by the accident. She became mentally deranged and couldn't even take care of herself, let alone fulfill her responsibilities as a mother. The corners of Song Jining's eyes were a little wet. She turned around discreetly and hid her face from the light. She said quietly to Hua Xiaoheng, "Come in. You should have some too." Hua Xiaoheng nodded and followed Song Jining into her office. He closed the door behind him. Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi were standing guard at the top of the stairs, while Zhao Liangzi was standing guard at the bottom of the elevator. They were wearing Bluetooth headsets so they could keep in touch at all times. Hua Xiaoheng looked around when he entered Song Jining's office. It had only been a few months, but Song Jining had already added a lot of books and lab equipment. She had also bought a few large computers. Song Jining went to her room to get 2 small soup bowls and spoons. She scooped a bowl of soup for Hua Xiaoheng and then scooped one for herself. She said, "Actually, the effects of cordyceps have been exaggerated. The active ingredient in cordyceps is cordycepic acid or mannitol. It's a very cheap and common chemical material." Hua Xiaoheng couldn't help but smile. Mannitol can also be used in food, so there's no harm in eating it. "Yes, I was just saying. The soup tastes good. It's cooked well." Song Jining said that but still ate 2 bowls of cordyceps soup. Hua Xiaoheng didn't eat a single bite. He stirred the soup with the spoon before pushing it to Song Jining. Song Jining took it without hesitation and finished Hua Xiaoheng's bowl in one go. She sighed deeply. "So comfortable. This soup is really good. You haven't had dinner again, have you?" Hua Xiaoheng looked at Song Jining quietly. "I'll order meals for you from now on. Someone will deliver them to you 3 times a day. You can just eat them." "Oh? That's a good thing? We have a cafeteria here. I've been there a few times. It's not bad." Song Jining avoided Hua Xiaoheng's knowing gaze guiltily. She really didn't have time. The urgency to rebuild the experiment was like a whip lashing at her. She wanted to devote all her time to it. 24 hours a day wasn't enough. She couldn't remember how many days she had fallen asleep in front of her computer and continued working when she woke up in the morning. However, even though she was working so hard, her complexion didn't diminish at all. It was as if all the energy she had accumulated over the past 16 years of her mental disorder was now being unleashed. Xiaoheng smiled and picked up his phone to text Dean Shixiang. He asked him to go to an auspicious restaurant and order a year's worth of healthy food for Song Jining. He had to deliver it to her office 3 times a day. If he didn't do that, Song Jining would still be hungry and full. In the long run it would affect her health. Song Jining didn't say anything and finished the rest of the soup. She also ate 2 whole wheat buns that Xiaoheng had brought with him. Xiaoheng sat across from Song Jining and watched her finish everything. He then cleaned up the soup bowls and took them to Song Jining's private bathroom next door to wash. Song Jining followed him in and leaned against the bathroom door to look at Xiaoheng's tall figure. She suddenly asked, "Xiaoheng, do you have something on your mind? Do you need my help?" A mother knows her son best. Although Song Jining had been absent for a long time when Xiaoheng was growing up, nothing could stop their blood connection. She was acutely aware of the subtle changes in Xiaoheng's emotions. Other than Gu Nianji, Song Jining was the second person who could sense Xiaoheng's hidden emotions. Xiaoheng washed the soup bowls and placed them in the closet. He then washed his hands with hand sanitizer and wiped them clean before turning around to say, "Let's talk outside. I do have something on my mind." Song Jining was overjoyed. She went up to Xiaoheng and shook his arm. She said solemnly, "Xiaoheng, I'm very happy that you came to find me." It was a mother's blessing to be able to be relied on by her child and to do things for her child. Xiaoheng was a bit speechless. He was no longer a child, but in Song Jining's eyes, he was probably still the 12-year-old boy from 17 years ago who secretly skipped school to visit her with a birthday cake. This is the first chapter with 3,000 words. Today is the first day of February, so please vote for your guaranteed monthly votes. Okay, I'll ask for monthly votes for every chapter. Do you remember to vote? There will be an additional chapter at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General of the Chidian app at noon to collect your red packet. You just have to click to the end of the chapter and look for the password. Chapter 534. Xiaoheng discreetly withdrew his arm and walked out of Song Jining's bathroom to head to her office. Song Jining smiled as she followed him back to her office and sat down. "Tell me, what do you need me for?" Song Jining opened the notebook on her laptop, intending to jot down Xiaoheng's request on her electronic calendar. That way she could add a reminder so she wouldn't forget. Xiaoheng sat across from Song Jining with one hand on her desk and the other playing with his phone. He said calmly, "I just submitted a marriage application." Song Jining gasped and couldn't close her mouth for a long time. After a long time she finally stood up in surprise. Placing both hands on the desk, she leaned forward and said eagerly, "Xiaoheng, you're really getting married? Who's the bride? Is it Nianji?" After Song Jining came to her senses, she quickly noticed the different way Gu Nianji looked at Xiaoheng. Of course, she also noticed Xiaoheng's different attitude towards Gu Nianji. She was happy to see the two of them get married. Gu Nianji was a genius girl, and Song Jining had also been called a genius girl when she was young. Geniuses always appreciated each other and she liked this lively and cute girl. Xiaoheng nodded slightly with a faint smile on his face. His fingers gently tapped on Song Jining's desk and even his voice was much gentler. "You like Nianji too?" "Yes, this girl and I hit it off very well." Song Jining beamed with joy, but after a while she was confused again. Submitting a marriage application is a good thing, so why did you come to see me? She had thought it was a difficult question. Xiaoheng looked down at the delicate carvings on the side of the dark red mahogany desk. His voice was very low. "After the marriage application was submitted, my father objected during the organization's meeting." "What?" "He objected." "What right does your father have to object?" Song Jining was furious as soon as she heard this. Her pale face flushed red and her limpid eyes were like stormy seas. She slammed the desk. "Don't worry, I'll go see your father tomorrow. If he dares to stop me from bringing my daughter-in-law into the family, I'll let him know why flowers are so red." Xiaoheng didn't expect Song Jining to be so supportive of him and Gu Nianji. A warm feeling welled up in his heart, but it was fleeting. He quickly regained his composure. "Then I'll leave it to you." Xiaoheng stood up and bowed slightly. "It's late. You should rest." "Well, I won't keep you either. It's the middle of the night. Go back and sleep early." Song Jining looked at her watch. It was already past 4 in the morning. She personally walked Hua Xiaoheng out. The silent corridor lit up again, and Song Jinning's face glowed in the light. Xiaoheng, does Nianji know about your marriage report? As a mother-in-law, what gift should I prepare for her? Do you know what she likes? Song Jinning asked excitedly. She couldn't wait to bring Gu Nianji in right away. Hua Xiaoheng froze. He put his hands in his trouser pockets and walked slowly. He shook his head. She doesn't know yet. He glanced at Song Jinning. Please don't tell anyone. Why? Song Jinning looked at Hua Xiaoheng in shock. Is there something that needs to be kept a secret? She now knew that her son wasn't doing a normal job, so she was very careful not to cause him trouble. Hua Xiaoheng shook his head again. That's not the reason. Then what reason is it? How can you be like this? You're getting married and the girl doesn't even know. You're really taking care of everything. Song Jinning couldn't help laughing. She was in a very good mood. Hua Xiaoheng remembered Gu Nianji's resistance to her new identity. He was silent for a moment. Because the marriage application is only the first step. After it's approved, there will be a background check. I'm not sure how long the background check will take. It could be as short as 6 months or as long as 2 or 3 years. Oh. Song Jinning was confused. I don't think it was that troublesome when I married your father? Yes. Different positions and military ranks mean different levels of background checks. Hua Xiaoheng explained briefly. Song Jinning instantly understood. Simply put, Hua Guanshan's military rank wasn't high at the time, and his position was only in the middle ranks. Therefore, the time and procedures for the background check were much simpler. Hua Xiaoheng was already a general and a special confidential department in the military. The intensity and length of the background check was much higher than Hua Guanshan's at the time. After sending Hua Xiaoheng off, Song Jinning only slept for 3 hours. She got up to wash up and change her clothes. Before Hua Guanshan left for work, she once again went to the Hua residence. Hua Guanshan was the only one living here now. The Zhangs had all been chased out. Hua Xuanong and Hua Jialan had gone to Europe. The empty house echoed as she walked. Hua Guanshan left early and returned late. He rarely stayed here. However, Song Jinning arrived early today, so Hua Guanshan hadn't left yet. When he looked up, he saw Song Jinning walk in wearing a sky-blue dress suit. Hua Guanshan's breath almost stopped. He stared blankly at the cold and beautiful Song Jinning walking up to him. He was about to speak when he heard Song Jinning frown and ask unhappily, "Why are you against Xiaoheng's marriage application? What right do you have to oppose it?" Hua Guanshan's passion were blocked by Song Jinning's words. His expression darkened and he said in a low voice, "What did you say? How did you know about this?" He had expressed his opposition during a regular meeting. Could someone have leaked the secret? Hua Guanshan thought of General Ji, and the fire in his heart burned even brighter. Don't care how I know. I'm only asking if you oppose Xiaoheng's marriage application. Song Jinning glared at him. Her beautiful face became even more vivid and beautiful. I oppose it. Hua Guanshan's face darkened. He raised his head and said coldly, "Do you support it?" Of course I support it. Song Jinning also raised her head and refused to be outdone. Xiaoheng and Nianji are a match made in heaven. Why are you opposing it? A match made in heaven? Hua Guanshan wanted to laugh out loud. Jinning, do you know that Nianji grew up with Xiaoheng? Xiaoheng is her guardian. So what? He's just a guardian. He's not a blood relative. Song Jinning sneered disdainfully. I've already figured it out. The military entrusted Xiaoheng to take care of Nianji. What misunderstanding do you have about this nominal guardian relationship? It's not that I have a misunderstanding. It's that other people will have a misunderstanding. Hua Guanshan looked at the stubborn Song Jinning and felt like his blood vessels were about to burst. He also glared at Song Jinning. Nianji grew up with him. When he became her guardian, she was only 12 years old. Do you know that? Xiaoheng is 10 years older than Nianji. What do you want other people to think? What do they think? Does Xiaoheng want to continue his career in the future? Have you thought about this? It was the second night. Today was the first day of February, so they had to vote for their guaranteed monthly votes. P.S. Thank you, Mark of the Phantom, for the gift of Heshabi yesterday. Moi. Chapter 535. Song Jinning had been obsessed with research her entire life. Her love for Hua Guanshan was now a thing of the past. Other than research, all she cared about was her son Hua Xiaoheng. Her son's lifelong happiness was the most important thing to her. Who would dare? Song Jinning took a step forward and pointed at Hua Guanshan. Whoever thinks that is filthy. Don't put your shameful, crooked thoughts on my son. Nianji was 12 when Xiaoheng became Nianji's guardian. But Xiaoheng didn't start liking her when she was 12. Can't you grow some brains? You say it's not, but what if someone says it is? Hua Guanchen looked at his wife, who had spent her entire life in the ivory tower of a university research institute. A trace of longing flashed across his eyes. She had always been a princess, but he had never been a prince. If someone is slandering their son and daughter-in-law like that, what are you doing as a father? Song Jinning's finger was almost poking Hua Guanchen's chest. Instead of standing up for them, you're trying to backstab them. Are you even human? Hua Guanchen was seething with anger. He felt that he would never be able to reason with Song Jinning. He waved his hand and said, Fine, fine. This is none of your business. Don't get involved. It's not my problem. Song Jinning was even angrier. I'm Xiaoheng's mother. Why isn't it my problem? If I can't do anything as a mother, then what right do you, as a father, have to do anything? Hua Guanchen felt a little guilty. He said fiercely, I'm not objecting as a father. I'm objecting as the director of the military's political department. Oh, now you remember that you're the director of the military's political department? Song Jinning sneered. But everyone else thinks you're Xiaoheng's father. What should we do? How about this? To make you more selfless, you'll break off your father-son relationship with Xiaoheng. No matter how much you object, it has nothing to do with us. Break off my father-son relationship? In your dreams. Hua Guanchen lost his wife, but he couldn't lose his son. He had high hopes for his son. He had always hoped that he could reach heights that he and his grandfather had never reached. That was why he was very concerned about his son's marriage. In my dreams? I want to let you see if I'm dreaming or not. Song Jinning shook her jade-white fist in front of Hua Guanchen. If you continue to object, I promise you won't have a son. Hua Guanchen froze and frowned for a long time before shaking his head. If Xiaoheng really disowns his father for Gunyanji, then I have even more reason to object. You're going to object even if Xiaoheng wants to sever ties with you? I won't agree even if Xiaoheng wants to sever ties with me, Hua Guanchen said firmly. I'm doing this for his own good. He'll understand. Song Jinning didn't want to talk to him anymore. She didn't understand why she had such deep feelings for him and loved him for so many years. She took a deep breath and suppressed the frustration in her heart. She asked Hua Guanchen in confusion, Isn't marriage only about mutual love? What are you thinking? When you married me, did you also do it for a smooth promotion? Hua Guanchen was stunned again and instinctively refuted Song Jinning. How were we the same back then? We were nothing back then, so of course we could get married if we liked each other. But Xiaoheng is different. Haha, what's different? He's even more powerful than you were back then. Can't he even marry the girl he loves? Then what's the point of being a major general? Song Jinning snorted. Forget it, it's hard to reason with people like you. I'm just being nosy. Why should I reason with you? Hua Guanchen was so angry he almost had a heart attack. Song Jinning turned to leave after speaking. The sky-blue figure suddenly flashed in front of Hua Guanchen. The snow-white silk scarf around her neck fluttered like a cloud floating in front of him from the blue sky. Hua Guanchen's heart throbbed. He reached out to grab Song Jinning's arm and whispered, Jinning, did you come here just to argue with me? No, I don't argue with people. Song Jinning didn't turn around. I'm here to reason with you. But you're being stubborn and I'm wasting my time. Let go of me. Song Jinning yanked her arm out of Hua Guanchen's grasp and quickly walked out of the Hua residence. After exiting the large iron gates of the courtyard, Song Jinning turned back to look at the residence she had lived in for over 20 years. She suddenly felt very unfamiliar. Had 16 years changed Hua Guanchen, or had he always been this kind of person? It was just that there was no conflict of interest back then, so he never showed his true nature? Song Jinning's mind was a mess. Her footsteps were hurried as she left the military compound without stopping to return to her laboratory at the Institute of High-Energy Physics. Early in the morning, Hua Xiaoheng had just come out of the conference room after a meeting. Zhao Liangzi walked up to him and whispered, Hua Xiao, your father is here. He's waiting for you in the small conference room over there. Hua Xiaoheng looked at his schedule. Do I still have meetings today? Not today, just a regular meeting in the morning. Zhao Liangzi scratched his head awkwardly. He knew Hua Xiaoheng was looking for an excuse to not see Hua Guanchen. Unfortunately, Hua Guanchen's rank and position were higher than Hua Xiaoheng's. He didn't even need to make an appointment to see Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng handed the documents to Zhao Liangzi to take back to his office. He walked to the small conference room with a serious expression. Xiaoheng. Huo Guanchen watched Hua Xiaoheng walk in with a calm expression. He couldn't tell if he was happy or unhappy. He sat down in the seat in front of Huo Guanchen and said in a business-like tone, "General Huo, what brings you here today?" Huo Guanchen was furious that he didn't even call him father. He wanted to ease the tension, but he couldn't care less now. He knocked on the table and ordered, "Withdraw your marriage application immediately. Marriage is not a game." Hua Xiaoheng placed both hands on the conference table and tilted his head to look at Huo Guanchen. He didn't say a word. His well-defined features were stunning, but he was like a statue. He was so calm that it was almost impossible to hear his breathing. Huo Guanchen felt uncomfortable under Hua Xiaoheng's gaze. He lowered his head to take a sip of tea and asked, "Why aren't you saying anything? Or do you have nothing to say?" Hua Xiaoheng shook his head and said calmly, "There's nothing to say. I don't want to waste time." "What kind of attitude is that?" Huo Guanchen put down his teacup heavily. His face gradually became angry. "In terms of seniority, I'm your father. In terms of rank, I'm higher than you. Is this how you talk to me?" Huo Guanchen was very unhappy with Hua Xiaoheng's attitude, whether it was a junior talking to an elder or a subordinate talking to a superior. Hua Xiaoheng was still unmoved. He looked away and out the window for a while. "In terms of seniority, this is the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces. It's where I work. I can't talk about personal matters during working hours. In terms of rank, please talk about business, General Hua." "I'm talking about business with you." Huo Guanchen's face darkened. "Your marriage is not a personal matter. Listen carefully. Withdraw your marriage application now." "Is that so?" Hua Xiaoheng smiled. "If my marriage is not a personal matter, then you have even less right to talk to me about it." "What do you mean?" Huo Guanchen's expression changed again. He watched his son grow up and leave his protection. He had mixed feelings. "Nothing. General Ji and the others are happy to see it happen. I don't know why General Huo would object." Hua Xiaoheng tapped his fingers on the table. Huo Guanchen was a little annoyed. If someone else agreed, Huo Guanchen could say that the person had ulterior motives, but not General Ji. Hua Xiaoheng was groomed by General Ji. Everyone knew that he was grooming Hua Xiaoheng as the heir. If General Ji wanted to destroy Hua Xiaoheng, he had plenty of ways to do so. He couldn't use the issue of marriage to trick him. Huo Guanchen hesitated. He thought about the possible consequences and shook his head. "I said no means no. Even if General Ji agrees, I still have to object. Xiaoheng, I'm doing this for your own good. You're obsessed with sex and can't understand what I mean. Wait for you." Hua Xiaoheng raised his hand and gestured for Huo Guanchen to stop. He waved a finger in front of Huo Guanchen. "General Hua, don't use such an unprofessional and slanderous term in front of me. Don't be so formal. You know what I mean." Huo Guanchen frowned. He truly felt that his son was confused. Otherwise, how could he not understand such a simple matter? "I really don't know what you mean," Hua Xiaoheng said calmly. "Why don't you just say it?" Huo Guanchen was speechless. There were some things he could say in front of Song Jining, but not in front of Hua Xiaoheng. He couldn't let the person in question know about his private plans. "Why not? My time is precious. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving." Hua Xiaoheng stood up and gestured for him to leave. "If it's a private matter, you can wait until the weekend when I'm on leave." Huo Guanchen saw that Hua Xiaoheng was being stubborn and saw his determination. He couldn't tolerate it anymore. "Xiaoheng, if you insist on marrying Gu Nianji, the achievements you've worked so hard for over a decade might go up in smoke. You might even be forced to transfer back to your hometown. Do you really want that to happen?" Huo Guanchen looked at him deeply and stood up to leave the small conference room. He walked past Hua Xiaoheng and from the corner of his eye, he saw that Hua Xiaoheng was still standing there. He didn't even turn his head and his gaze was fixed straight ahead, as straight as a military stance. Huo Guanchen sighed internally. He shook his head and strode away. Hua Xiaoheng only left the small conference room after Huo Guanchen had left. With his hands behind his back, he slowly walked back to his office. He opened the window and looked at the bright summer scenery outside. The sun was shining brightly, but he only wanted to smoke. Gu Nianji rushed for her homework for a day and night and finally finished all the tasks Hijichu had previously given her, including her tasks as a teaching assistant. In the evening, she packed her things and was about to go out for dinner with Ma Qiqi when she heard her phone ring. Taking it out, she saw it was Gu Yanran. "Nianji, it's big sister. I'm here to pick you up for dinner." Gu Yanran was very efficient over the phone and didn't allow Gu Nianji to refuse. "I'll be at your dorm soon. Come down quickly." This is the first chapter with 3,000 words. Dear friends, please vote for your guaranteed monthly votes. There will be an additional chapter at 7 p.m. P.S. Thank you Raindrop6868 for tipping Heshabi yesterday. Mwah. Remember to come to the Major General of Chidian at noon to receive your red packet. Just click to the end of the chapter and read the password. Chapter 536. Gu Nianji couldn't refuse even if she wanted to because Gu Yanran had already hung up. If she didn't go down or went out to eat with Ma Qiqi, she would be standing Gu Yanran up. Gu Nianji couldn't bring herself to break a promise and make someone wait for so long. Moreover, Gu Yanran had a relationship with her that was slightly more than that of a normal person. Gu Nianji looked down at her phone and rubbed it for a while before saying to Ma Qiqi, "Qiqi, I have something going on so I can't go eat with you." Ma Qiqi heard Gu Nianji take a call and thought it was her incredibly handsome boyfriend. She winked at her and giggled. "Nianji, you value your lover over your friend. Bah. You're the one who values love over friendship." Gu Nianji knew that Ma Qiqi had misunderstood, but she couldn't tell Ma Qiqi about her relationship with Gu Yanran right now. She could only vaguely say, "My family came to visit me." "Your family?" Ma Qiqi couldn't hide her emotions and said in surprise, You're not an orphan girl?" Gu Nianji understood what Ma Qiqi was implying, so she spread her hands and said, "Yes, I thought I had no relatives but someone popped up recently. I'm still investigating so I don't know if she's my relative." "Oh, that's great." Ma Qiqi was instantly elated. She draped an arm over Gu Nianji's shoulder. "Hurry up and go. Don't make people wait too long." For an orphan girl to suddenly have relatives was certainly something to be happy about. Ma Qiqi had both parents and was the apple of her eye, so she sympathized with Gu Nianji very much. Now that he heard that she also had a relative, he was genuinely happy for her. Gu Nianji squeezed her hand. "Okay, then I'll go down now." After a few steps, she turned around and said to Ma Qiqi, Qiqi, don't tell anyone about this, okay?" Ma Qiqi nodded. "Don't worry, I won't." When he got downstairs, he saw a silver 6-seater Audi Pikes Peak Row parked next to the stairs in front of the building. Gu Nianji's eyelids twitched uncontrollably as she looked at the cursive KU on the silver nameplate on the car. This Gu Yanran really knew how to enjoy herself. It was obvious that the car was custom-made, and the price was around 10 million USD. It was once one of the top 5 luxury cars in the world. However, it was impossible to tell that the car was so expensive from its appearance. Gu Nianji knew about this car because she had coincidentally helped He Jichu with a small case. There was an introduction to the world's top luxury cars. She had a good memory and could remember almost everything she saw. Now that she saw the luxury car that had been on the webpage appear before her, she took a deep breath and patted her pounding chest before walking towards the car. Gu Yanran peeked out from the window of the back seat and smiled at her. "Come on in." The driver got out of the driver's seat and went around to open the door for Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji was speechless. This was too ostentatious. Did he need a chauffeur just to drive an SUV? If it was a Rolls-Royce it would be fine. That kind of luxury car would be too embarrassing to drive outside without a driver. But an SUV can only be driven by oneself. Gu Nianji pursed her lips and got into the car. She sat next to Gu Yanran and nodded at her. "Miss Gu, you're really decisive. I already made plans with my roommates to eat, but I still had to stand them up." Gu Yanran placed a hand on Gu Nianji's shoulder and said, "Nianji, I'm really sorry. I really wanted to see you so much that I didn't think too much. I apologize." She then said, "Where were you planning to eat with your classmates? Why don't you ask your classmates to come too?" Since Gu Yanran had already said that, Gu Nianji couldn't keep a straight face and pretend to be unhappy. She smiled and reached out to smooth her hair that hung down to her chest. She took the opportunity to move Gu Yanran's hand away from her shoulder and said, "It's okay. My roommates are very nice and reasonable. They won't mind." "That's good." Gu Yanran nodded and said emotionally, "Your friend is a sensible person. She knows that friends are not as important as family. They can understand giving up friends to be with family. If your friends can't understand, then you don't need them." Was she teaching her a lesson so soon? Gu Nianji thought about it but couldn't think of anything to refute Gu Yanran. She could only remain silent the entire way and sit in Gu Yanran's car to a high-class clubhouse not far from the school. Gu Yanran was obviously a VIP there. She took out her VIP black card, and the handsome young man at the door immediately brightened. He respectfully led her and Gu Nianji to a small, elegant room. The decoration of this single room was very gentle. There were a few beautiful paper lanterns hanging on the roof. The paper was snow white, but the light was softened when it shone on the faces of the people. It was like a soft light and everyone had a feeling that their skin was as clear as jade. The room was covered with tatami mats with a short table in the middle. The two of them had to kneel on the tatami mats. Gu Nianji disliked the Japanese kneeling posture the most. Her legs were numb after eating. Miss Gu, do you like Japanese food? Gu Nianji glanced at Gu Yenran and thought of the conflict she saw between Yamaguchi Yuko and Gu Yenran in the waters of the Blue Hole. Gu Yenran also thought of Yamaguchi Yuko. Her eyes dimmed as she looked at the small table on the tatami mats and said quietly, "It's all right. I used to eat here with a Japanese friend." Miss Gu, do you have many Japanese friends? Gu Nianji sat cross-legged on the tatami and watched Gu Yenran kneel across from her. Her posture was very precise. Gu Yenran had always been beautiful. When she sat with her head down, she had the quiet and gentle air of a Japanese woman. Gu Nianji remembered how Gu Yenran had personally killed Yamaguchi Yuko and kicked her body into the sea. Compared to this Gu Yenran who was quietly pouring sake for her, it was like a completely different person. What do you want to eat? Gu Yenran took the meticulously drawn menu and handed it to Gu Nianji. Order whatever you like. Gu Nianji didn't look at the menu and smiled. I'm not familiar with Japanese food. I'll leave it to Miss Gu to decide. Okay, I'll order a few of the specialty dishes here and a bottle of plum wine. We can talk while we eat. Gu Nianji nodded. Soon, a waiter in a kimono walked in and took down Gu Yenran's order. He bowed deeply and backed out, closing the door behind him. Nianji, how have you been all these years? Why didn't you look for us? Gu Yenran was very interested in what Gu Nianji had been through all these years. I was worried sick. I never stopped looking for you in the Caribbean. How did I know you'd come here? Gu Nianji didn't remember at all how she went from a ship in the Caribbean Sea to a car that was about to explode on the streets of Sea City. Therefore, she couldn't answer Gu Yenran's question and only said calmly, I don't remember either. When I woke up, Wuxiao had already saved me. After that, Wuxiao became my guardian. Gu Yenran already knew all this. Now that Gu Nianji was saying it, it only confirmed the information she had received before. This Wuxiao Empire's military is so unreliable. How could they let you grow up with a man? Gu Yenran sighed repeatedly. Nianji, it's all my fault. If only I had found you earlier. Gu Yenran's words were sincere, and Gu Nianji found that she couldn't bring herself to hate her. Wuxiao is very good to me. I've never been wronged. Gu Nianji quickly defended Wuxiaohan. Miss Gu, don't think too much. Really? Gu Yenran looked at her steadily. Nianji, you and I are sisters. Other than our father, we're the closest family in the world. Regardless of whether you see me as a sister or not, you're my only sister. If I don't care about you, who else should I care about? Yeah, thank you. Sister Gu. Gu Nianji was finally willing to call Gu Yenran's sister, although she added the word Gu before sister. As they were talking, Gu Nianji's phone rang again. This time it was Wuxiaoheng's exclusive ringtone. They hadn't contacted each other for a few days. Gu Nianji had been resisting the urge to call Wuxiaoheng. At that moment, Wuxiaoheng finally called. She couldn't hold it in anymore and quickly answered the call. Nianji, where are you? Wuxiaoheng's voice sounded especially low over the phone, and there was a trace of imperceptible fatigue. Gu Nianji sensed it and quickly said, I'm outside having dinner with Miss Gu Yenran. Wuxiao, what's up? Wuxiaoheng froze. Gu Yenran is having dinner with you? Where are you? How many people are there? It's just me and Miss Gu. Gu Nianji looked at Gu Yenran and swiped her finger to send the address to Wuxiaoheng. Wuxiaoheng was sitting in a car below Gu Nianji's dormitory. It was the second night. You must vote for your friends' guaranteed monthly votes. And recommendation votes. Chapter 537. Receiving the address from Gu Nianji, Wuxiaoheng looked it up and discovered that it was at a restaurant not far from here. Gu Yenran heard it was Wuxiaoheng and immediately invited him warmly. Nianji, is that Mr. Hua? Let him come with us. I ordered a lot of food and we can't finish it. Is that so? Should we invite him? Gu Nianji hesitated. Yes, no matter what, he's my future brother-in-law. Gu Yenran winked at Gu Nianji, looking happy for her. Gu Nianji was pleasantly pleased by the word brother-in-law. Her little face blushed slightly, and her porcelain-like skin blushed faintly like cherry blossoms fluttering in the snow. It was extremely moving. Gu Yenran reached out to hold her hand and squeezed it gently. She smiled. My sister is so beautiful. Who knows how many elite men will fall for you in the future. Mr. Hua is really lucky and has good taste for you so early on. Sister, you're exaggerating. Gu Nianji had subconsciously dropped the word gu and directly called Gu Yanran's sister. Gu Yanran smiled and poured Gu Nianji another glass of sake. Gu Nianji answered Hua Xiaoheng's call. Hua Xiao, have you had dinner? Do you want to come over and eat with us? Hua Xiaoheng wasn't interested in Japanese food, but because Gu Nianji was there, he had to go see Gu Yanran and Gu Nianji. Okay, I'll be right there. Wait for me. Hua Xiaoheng hung up and said to Zhao Liangzi, tell Big Xiong to come back. We're going to the restaurant. Yin Shixiang had already gotten out of the car and went to the dormitory building to ask for Gu Nianji. However, Gu Nianji didn't come down for a long time. It was Ma Qiqi who came down. She asked as soon as she came down, who's looking for Nianji? Me. Yin Shixiang walked over and looked at Ma Qiqi. You're Nianji's roommate? Ma Qiqi nodded. Nianji went out to eat with her family. Who are you? Do you want to leave a message for her? Then she asked, do you have her phone number? Why don't you call her? Of course, Yin Shixiang had Gu Nianji's phone number. It never occurred to him that Gu Nianji wouldn't be in the dorm at this time. Family? How could Nianji have any family? Yin Shixiang immediately realized and his expression became serious. How long has she been gone? Do you know who it is? Ma Qiqi was shocked. She wanted to say it, but she remembered that Gu Nianji had asked her to keep it a secret. She didn't know if she should say it or not, so she blushed. Do you know? Yin Shixiang raised his voice and his face darkened even more. This little girl looked fresh and clean, but her words were sloppy. I'm not sure either. She said she just popped up. Ma Qiqi sighed inwardly. Nianji, this is as far as I can help you. Just appeared? Yin Shixiang frowned and was about to ask further when he heard Hua Xiaoheng's voice through the Bluetooth headset. Come back. Nianji isn't here. Yin Shixiang immediately understood that Hua Xiaoheng must have called Gu Nianji. He angrily waved his hand at the confused Ma Qiqi. Alright, I got it. Thank you. With that he turned around and left. He was tall and burly, so when he walked out, he blocked almost all the light from the street lights shining in from the outside. Ma Qiqi curiously looked at his back before turning to go upstairs. Yin Shixiang returned to the car and heard Hua Xiaoheng say to the driver, Fan Jian, drive. Where are we going? Yin Shixiang turned around to ask Zhao Liangzi, who was sitting next to Hua Xiaoheng. Zhao Liangzi held a laptop in his hand and replied without turning his head, to Huffing Clubhouse. Nianji is eating with Gu Yanran there. Oh, it's Gu Yanran? Yin Shixiang slapped his forehead. No wonder her roommate was stammering and said Nianji went out to eat with her family. I was wondering where Nianji's family came from other than us. Big Xiong, you're so thick-skinned. How are you considered Nianji's family? Zhao Liangzi laughed and shook his head. Gu Yanran is Nianji's legal family. How am I not considered Nianji's family? I'm her older brother. Yin Shixiang screamed as he fiercely attacked Zhao Liangzi. Zhao Liangzi snorted but didn't continue arguing with Yin Shixiang because he noticed from the corner of his eye that Hua Xiaoheng's brows were slightly furrowed. It meant he was unhappy. Yin Shixiang turned around and saw Zhao Liangzi shoot him a look. He didn't say anything and took out his phone to scan the address. When they arrived at the clubhouse where Gu Nianji and Gu Yanran were eating, Fan Jian stopped the car at the entrance and waited for Hua Xiaoheng, Zhao Liangzi, and Yin Shixiang to get out before driving to the clubhouse's parking lot. Hua Xiaoheng brought Zhao Liangzi and Yin Shixiang to the private room where Gu Nianji and Gu Yanran were eating. A waiter at the door opened the paper door and bowed. Please come in. Gu Yanran had told them that they would have guests coming later. Hua Xiaoheng and the others walked in and saw that it was a very elegant private room. Gu Yanran didn't expect 3 people to come. She thought it was only Hua Xiaoheng. She and Gu Nianji were using a small square table that was just right for 2 or 3 people. It could seat up to 4 people, 1 on each side. 5 people would be a bit too crowded. She was about to wave for the waiter to change to a larger private room when Yin Shixiang beat her to it. Excuse me, do you have a larger, more normal private room? Gu Nianji couldn't help laughing. She walked over to pat Yin Shixiang's arm and looked up. Brother Xiong, I understand that you want a larger private room, but what do you mean by normal? What's not normal here? Yin Shixiang laughed heartily and put his hand on her shoulder. I'm not used to kneeling. Little Zhe Hua Xiao and I won't be able to eat in this position. Gu Nianji actually didn't like it either, but she could tolerate it. Unlike Hua Xiaoheng and the others, they probably didn't need to tolerate it. Okay, let's change to another room. Gu Nianji clapped her hands in agreement. Gu Yanran slowly stood up and nodded to Hua Xiaoheng. Mr. Hua, nice to meet you. Hua Xiaoheng nodded casually. When did Miss Gu arrive? Didn't you want to verify it in Barbados? I just arrived a few days ago. Now that it's confirmed, I can't wait to find my sister. Gu Yanran walked to Gu Nianji's side and held her hand. She draped an arm around her shoulder in a protective posture. The waiter at the door went to find the manager to change the private room. Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi stood at the door with a smile. They were on guard and watched the three people in the room amused. Wu Xiaoheng stood alone to the side with Gu Nianji and Gu Yanran in front of him. Gu Nianji didn't say much, but Gu Yanran started chatting with Wu Xiaoheng politely. Miss Gu believes that Nianji is your sister? Wu Xiaoheng asked coolly. His gaze swept past Gu Yanran's face and landed on Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji tilted her head slightly to avoid Wu Xiaoheng's gaze. The evidence is irrefutable. I have no choice but to believe it. Gu Yanran joked. I haven't thanked Mr. Hua for taking care of my sister all these years. I'll treat Mr. Hua, Mr. Zhao, and Mr. Yin to a meal today. It's my duty. Miss Gu is too polite. Wu Xiaoheng absent-mindedly brushed Gu Yanran off, but his gaze was still on Gu Nianji. Sister, you said you were treating me to a meal. Gu Nianji still didn't look at Wu Xiaoheng. She pretended to be jealous and shook Gu Yanran's arm. Of course it's mainly to treat you. Treating them today is just a convenience. Treating me to a kiss is the main thing. Gu Yanran pinched Gu Nianji's delicate little nose. They were sisters after all. They seemed to be very close in an instant. Gu Yanran looked at Gu Nianji, who was throwing a tantrum, and then at Wu Xiaoheng, who kept staring at her. She giggled. Mr. Hua, you and Nianji already have this kind of relationship. Isn't it too distant to still call me Miss Gu? Wu Xiaoheng smiled and didn't reply. Yin Shixiang quickly came over to interrupt. There's a bigger private room over there. Let's go. I already told the manager. Gu Yanran nodded. Let's go. Gu Nianji had put on too much airs earlier. Now she couldn't find a way out. She was also too embarrassed to act cute in front of so many people, especially in front of Gu Yanran. She didn't dare to look at him again. She lowered her head and followed Gu Yanran to the door. When she reached Wu Xiaoheng's side, he finally reached out to hold her arm. He didn't say anything, but his palm was burning. The part of his hand that was holding Gu Nianji's arm was almost scalding. Gu Nianji's heart trembled. She couldn't help but slow down. Gu Yanran looked back and smiled. We'll go first. You guys take your time. As she spoke, she said to Zhao Liangzi and Yin Shixiang, please go first. The private room over there is bigger than this one. There are also tables and chairs. You don't have to kneel to eat. After Gu Yanran, Zhao Liangzi, and Yin Shixiang left, only Wu Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji were left in the small private room. The half-old paper door in front of them was half-closed. There was no one in the hallway outside. They could see the beautiful paintings on the opposite wall. There was also a lantern with beautiful women hanging in the hallway. Wu Xiaoheng was silent. He didn't say anything. He pulled Gu Nianji into his arms. His two arms wrapped around her tightly. He lowered his head and kissed her forehead. His deep and magnetic voice echoed in her ear. Are you angry? Gu Nianji's anger had almost subsided. She couldn't help feeling even more wronged when he asked. Her eyes turned red. She struggled in Wu Xiaoheng's arms but couldn't break free. He hugged her even tighter. I've been busy lately. Wu Xiaoheng was silent for a long time. He finally explained. You're so busy that you don't even have time to make a call or send a text? Gu Nianji finally spoke. Her voice was as soft as a kitten's and it was even trembling. It was obvious that she had mustered up her courage to say this. They had only just started dating. There were no times when they couldn't help themselves. Gu Nianji couldn't imagine if he wouldn't be attracted to her at all after they spent more time together. This is the first chapter with 3,000 words. Dear friends, please vote for your guaranteed monthly votes. There will be an additional chapter at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General's Chidian app at noon to collect your red packets. Just click to the end of the chapter and read the password. In order not to affect everyone's red packets, I didn't even send out the ticket request. Hurry up and cast your monthly vote to support the Major General. Chapter 538. Wu Xiaoheng lowered his eyes to look at the girl in his arms. Her porcelain white and delicate skin was slightly flushed. Her eyes were bright like water and they were full of life. Every inch of her face and expression had long been engraved in the depths of his heart. They were incomparably familiar. I'll call you when I'm free in the future. Wu Xiaoheng gave in again because he subconsciously didn't want to see Gu Nianji frowning and unhappy. Then remember. Don't forget. Gu Nianji pouted her small, plump lips and looked up at Wu Xiaoheng. Her eyes were filled with his figure. I think our classmates in long-distance relationships want nothing more than to live on their phones. You haven't even called me once in the past few days. So that was the reason. Hua Xiaoheng didn't know whether to laugh or cry. How could he be on the phone all day like her classmates? It's impossible to call every day, Hua Xiaoheng said calmly and patted Gu Nianji's head. I'll try to call when I'm free. Okay, stop fooling around. Let's go eat. He naturally held her hand and walked out of the small room. Gu Nianji sighed. She felt that Hua Xiaoheng still didn't understand what she meant. Hua Xiao, I'm not asking you to call every day. She frowned, and her expression was a little depressed. But when you love someone, don't you want to see them more, listen to their voice, and even spend more time with them? For example, she wanted nothing more than to stick to Hua Xiaoheng every day. Unfortunately, she wasn't a child anymore. Back then, she could ignore everything and follow Hua Xiaoheng every day and be his leg pendant. Now that she was older, she would be a joke if she continued to be like this. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at Gu Nianji. Okay, I understand. He still held her hand and walked with her into the large single room. There was a long table in the middle of the room with all kinds of exquisite dishes and a few bottles of sake. Gu Yanran, Zhao Liangze, and Yin Shixiang were already sitting at the table and chatting happily. She looked up to see Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji walk in hand. Hua Xiaoheng's expression was normal, but Gu Nianji's expression was a bit ugly. However, after entering, she smiled faintly and sat next to Gu Yanran with Zhao Liangze and Yin Shixiang. Hua Xiaoheng knew that his girl was throwing a tantrum, so he didn't mind and sat on the other side of her. Only then did Gu Nianji reveal a hint of joy, and the gloominess in her eyes was no longer so obvious. Hua Xiaoheng took the serving chopsticks and picked up some of Gu Nianji's favorite dishes: shrimp tempura, pork rolls and ginger sauce, and a tender piece of Wagyu steak. He placed it on her plate, which was decorated with carps. Gu Nianji pointed at the tempura prawns on the other side of the table. I want that too. Hua Xiaoheng reached out with his long arm and placed a few on her small plate. Eat less fried food. It's not healthy. Tempura had a nice name, but it was actually a fried food. Gu Nianji ignored him and happily ate. Gu Yanran saw it and quickly said, then eat less. Nianji, Mr. Hua already said it, why are you still eating? I rarely eat fried food. It's fine if I eat it once in a while today, right? Gu Nianji looked at Hua Xiaoheng, then at Gu Yanran. She felt that both of them were controlling her. Yin Shixiang quickly helped her out and winked at her. Of course it's fine if you eat it once in a while. Also, our Nianji is a natural beauty. She won't get pimples or gain weight no matter how much fried junk food she eats. He really had to rub it in. Gu Nianji had been anxious for the past few days, so she did have a small pimple on her forehead. The delicious shrimp tempura instantly changed its taste in her mouth and tasted like wax. She swallowed it with all her might and didn't touch the tempura on her plate again. She only ate the Wagyu steak. Hua Xiaoheng gave her 2 sweet potato, glutinous rice, and red bean pastries to fill her stomach. Gu Yanran took a sip of sake. Her face was bright red and her eyes were rippling like water. She watched Hua Xiaoheng continuously pick food for Gu Nianji and smiled. Why aren't you eating, Mr. Hua? Is it not to your taste? Yeah, I'm eating. Hua Xiaoheng had a piece of Wagyu steak in front of him. He ate 2 bites before putting it down. Although Wagyu was known as the best beef in the world, Hua Xiaoheng just didn't like it. Gu Yanran then said to Gu Nianji, Nianji, you're also half the host. Don't just eat by yourself. Help Mr. Hua get food too. Mr. Hua has already gotten you a lot. Gu Nianji looked up. How am I half the host? Am I not a guest today? Sister, didn't you say you were treating me today? But you're my sister, so of course you're also half the host. Gu Yanran said as she used serving chopsticks to pick up another piece of Wagyu steak for Hua Xiaoheng. Everyone eat it while it's hot. It won't taste good when it's cold. Thank you. Hua Xiaoheng nodded and used a knife to cut the steak into small pieces. He ate it slowly. Gu Nianji smiled. We're all friends now. Sister doesn't have to keep calling him Mr. Hua, right? It sounds so unfamiliar. Okay, then I'll call him Hua Xiao like you do. Gu Yanran immediately changed the way she addressed him. Of course, calling him Hua Xiao was more familiar than calling him Mr. Hua, but it wasn't very intimate because everyone called him that. Gu Nianji was very satisfied with Gu Yanran's reaction. She looked at her with a smile and started eating the sweet potato glutinous rice balls. Hua Xiaoheng was halfway through eating when his phone rang. He unlocked it and looked at it before standing up. I'm going out to take a call. With that, he left the room. Zhao Liangze and Yin Shixiang immediately put down their chopsticks and followed him out. Only Gu Nianji and Gu Yanran were left in the room. Gu Yanran comforted Gu Nianji softly. Nianji, did you fight with Huashao? Don't be so hot-tempered. Oh? I didn't. Gu Nianji looked away guiltily. She didn't dare to meet Gu Yanran's eyes. You're still denying it? Look at how guilty you look. Gu Yanran was angry and amused at the same time. She held her wine glass and spaced out for a while. Huashao is such a rare good man. Nianji, you have to take advantage of him. Between the two of us, one of us has to be happy. Gu Nianji was confused and tilted her head to look at Gu Yanran. Sister, what are you talking about? I don't understand. You're still young. You'll understand in the future. Gu Yanran downed the wine in her glass. It's not easy to meet a good man. Once you meet him, don't let him go. Gu Nianji felt even more guilty. She smiled sheepishly and poured wine for Gu Yanran. What's wrong, sister? Are you drunk? You're talking nonsense. No, I'm not drunk. Gu Yanran looked at Gu Nianji and reached out to lift her chin with a finger. She studied her face for a long time and sighed. You're so beautiful. Nianji, you're getting more and more beautiful. Yeah, that's what everyone says. I really don't know how ugly I was when I was young. Gu Nianji made an amused expression. Gu Yanran giggled and took out a photo from her handbag. Here, look at what you looked like when you were young. Gu Nianji took it. It was a family photo. A gentle and elegant man and a quiet and gentle woman sat in the middle. There were two girls standing next to them. The older girl was about 16 or 17 years old, and the younger girl was about 11 years old. The older girl was definitely Gu Yanran, because her current appearance was not much different from when she was 16 or 17 years old. However, the younger girl was definitely Gu Nianji from 7 years ago. Gu Nianji looked at the little girl in the photo. She looked exactly the same as in the photo of her holding a doll. She immediately sat up straight and asked excitedly with her eyes wide open, Is this our family? Yeah. Gu Yanran looked at her strangely and asked carefully, This is Mom and Dad. Also, Nianji, look, my appearance hasn't changed much, but why didn't you recognize me when you saw me? Is there a reason? This was the second night. You must vote for the guaranteed monthly votes of your loved ones. And the recommendation votes. Chapter 539. Gu Nianji's amnesia wasn't a secret that needed to be hidden because too many people knew about it. Moreover, it was precisely because she couldn't remember anything before she was 12 that the Special Operations Forces had been searching for her for so many years. She shrugged and said nonchalantly, It's not a problem. I just don't remember. Don't remember? Gu Yanran's narrow phoenix eyes widened in shock as she repeated, How can you not remember? You really don't remember? Dad, Mom, and me are home. How can you not remember? I don't know either. Gu Nianji knocked her head. I really want to remember, but I can't. My head hurts every time I think about what happened that year. Oh? Your head hurts? Is that serious? Gu Yanran grew worried. How long has it been hurting? Do you want to see a doctor? I know the best neurosurgeon in the United States and a neurologist. I'll contact them and take you to the States for a follow-up. It's okay as long as I don't think about the past. Gu Nianji put down her chopsticks and took a sip of plum wine. And now that my sister and father have been found, I don't need to think about the past anymore. Gu Yanran nodded. No wonder. Tsai's sister was too careless. Your name was Gu Nianji, but I didn't even think to check if you were my sister. So we had to take a detour before we could reunite. Speaking of this, Gu Nianji thought of Hijichu. She moved closer to Gu Yanran and asked tentatively, Sister, have you known Professor He for a long time? He seems to be very close to you. It's all right. Gu Yanran smiled meaningfully. I only met Lawyer He 3 or 4 years ago. At that time it was because of the Gu family's matters and I needed a legal representative. That's why I found his law firm. His assistant Wen Shui is my lawyer. Gu Nianji didn't have a good impression of Wen Shui. She pouted and sat back down thinking about Gu Yanran's words. If what Gu Yanran said was true and Hijichu only met Gu Yanran 3 or 4 years ago, then why did Hijichu act like he had known her for a long time? Also, Hijichu did have a lot of evidence to prove that he had known her for a long time, but 3 or 4 years ago, Gu Nianji was already at the Huaxia Imperial Special Operations Forces base in Sea City and was under strict protection. She never had the chance to see Hijichu at all. It was really strange. You really only met 3 or 4 years ago. Gu Nianji poured a glass of wine for Gu Yanran. I thought the He and Gu families were old friends. Haha, if only we were family friends. Gu Yanran sighed and held Gu Nianji's hand on the table. Then I wouldn't be in such a sorry state. Nianji, I used to be the only one supporting the Gu family. I really can't take it anymore. You know, with father's current condition he can't do anything at all. I'm the only one left to fend for myself. Fortunately you're back. With us sisters working together, those people won't dare to do anything to us. Those people? Who are they? Gu Nianji had heard from Zhao Liangzi and Yin Shixiang that Gu Yanran had been held hostage by gunmen at the airport. Because of that, Hua Xiaoheng had been alone with her for a day and a night. Gu Nianji felt a little uncomfortable when she thought about it. But she knew that it wasn't Hua Xiaoheng's fault at all. And from the looks of it, Gu Yanran didn't seem to have such intentions. Therefore she suppressed her displeasure. Whether she was jealous or angry, as long as it didn't bother others, it was normal for people to vent their emotions. I don't know who they are either. Gu Yanran spread her hands. Nianji, since you don't remember the past, I don't mind telling you. Our father was a very outstanding scholar and engineer. He created many patents, and the patent fees that our family receives every year are astronomical. Oh, Gu Nianji replied, but didn't say anything special. Gu Yanran secretly observed Gu Nianji's expression and realized that she really didn't care about the Gu family's wealth. She couldn't help but secretly nod. If it was someone with ulterior motives, Gu Yanran would definitely be wary of them if their eyes lit up at the mention of a huge fortune. But Gu Nianji probably really didn't care? Of course, it was also possible that she was a great traitor and a great hypocrite. She wouldn't be able to tell the truth after a meal. Gu Yanran decided to wait and see. Gu Nianji really didn't care much about the Gu family's wealth. To someone who donated $100 million without hesitation, wealth was just a number to her. Look at you, you really don't know anything about the Gu family. Gu Yanran said with a half-smile. That's true. You have a strong boyfriend like Hua Xiao, so you don't have to care about the Gu family. But you are still a daughter of the Gu family, so when you get married in the future, I'll prepare a generous dowry for you. What day and age are you talking about dowry? Gu Nianji laughed and quickly changed the topic. Sister, what about you? My future brother-in-law, where is he? Gu Nianji originally wanted to say brother-in-law, but when she said that, she glanced at Gu Yanran's left ring finger and saw that there was no ring on it. She knew that Gu Yanran wasn't married yet, so she changed it to future brother-in-law. Future brother-in-law, huh? Gu Yanran tilted her head and smiled. Your sister has bad luck. She's already 25 years old, but she still doesn't have a boyfriend. Oh? No way? Sister is so beautiful, but she never had a boyfriend? Gu Nianji looked at Gu Yanran suspiciously and looked her up and down in disbelief. I used to have a boyfriend, but we broke up. Gu Yanran said nonchalantly. You don't think that I'm 25 or 26 years old and still an old virgin, do you? Gu Nianji's face flushed immediately. She mumbled a few times and lowered her head to eat. Gu Yanran looked at Gu Nianji's lowered cheeks and her white, jade-like earlobes turned pink. The light from the roof shone down, and the thin layer of soft hair on the back of her neck could be clearly seen. Like a baby's, it still seemed to exude a milky fragrance. A girl of 18 or 19 years old was beautiful and tender in every way. She was really at the age of a budding flower. Gu Yanran sighed slowly and looked at her watch. Why was Hua Xiao gone for so long? The phone call had taken almost half an hour. Gu Nianji also looked at her watch. Really? Was it urgent? Gu Yanran was familiar with Deputy Director Feng of the Huaxia Imperial Secret Service, so she knew that Hua Xiaoheng's identity wasn't ordinary. Later, Su Piaohong leaked the secret, and the video was uploaded online, which confirmed her suspicions. It was the Gu family's fortune that such a powerful man cared so much about his sister. Gu Yanran saw the watch on Gu Nianji's wrist from the corner of her eye and said, Am I seeing things? There's a woman's watch like this? I asked a few times, but they said they only have men's watches. Gu Nianji pulled down her sleeves to cover her watch and couldn't help smiling. She said casually, Hua Xiao gave this to me. I heard it was custom-made. One for him, one for me. Oh, so it's a custom-made couple's watch. No wonder. Gu Yanran sighed even more. Hua Xiao is really amazing. He actually got that arrogant brand to custom-make a couple's watch for him. Gu Nianji smiled and didn't reply. She stood up and said, I'll go see what's going on. Before she could walk out, the door to the private room opened. Yin Shixiang poked his head in. Nianji, we have something to do. We have to go back. Hua Xiao asked if you were coming. Oh? So soon? Gu Nianji hesitated and turned to look at Gu Yanran. She saw her sitting there alone. The long dining table was filled with delicacies, but she had the word lonely written all over her face. Gu Yanran waved at her. Go. Hua Xiao is more important than me. Don't argue with him anymore. When did I? Gu Nianji retorted unwillingly but still said, "Then I'll go first. Sister will talk later." Okay. Gu Yanran raised her glass and took a sip without looking at her. Gu Nianji could see that she was a bit unhappy, but would she be stupid to abandon Huo Xiaoheng and be with Gu Yanran at a time like this? She sighed and followed Yin Shixiang out of the club to the parking lot. Yin Shixiang opened the door for her, and Gu Nianji looked inside. Zhao Liangzi tactfully sat on the other side of the back seat. Huo Xiaoheng sat in the middle and seemed to be waiting for her. Gu Nianji smiled at him and said insincerely, "Huo Xiao, if you have something to do, you can leave first." But in her heart, she thought, if you dare leave first, then you're dead meat. Huo Xiaoheng pursed his lips and looked at her. He extended his hand to her. "Come in." His voice was a bit stern, but it carried the authority that she was familiar with. Gu Nianji pouted but still sat in the car. Fan Jian quickly started the car and drove into the night towards the south gate of B University. No one spoke on the way. Gu Nianji and Yin Shixiang were usually the most talkative people, but today they were both very quiet. Zhao Liangzi didn't need to say anything. He wouldn't speak if no one else spoke. Huo Xiaoheng habitually draped one arm on the back of the seat behind Gu Nianji and rubbed his forehead with the other. His face was expressionless, but it was obvious that something troublesome was going on. Gu Nianji was nervous and wanted to ask, but there were so many people in the car. She couldn't use her pestering skills, so she could only stay silent. She was actually very anxious. The car finally arrived at Gu Nianji's dorm. Fan Jian, Yin Shixiang, and Zhao Liangzi all got out of the car, leaving Gu Nianji and Huo Xiaoheng alone in the car. Now that there were no outsiders, the atmosphere between them relaxed a little. Huo Xiaoheng pulled on Gu Nianji's shoulder, and she leaned into his embrace. She chose a more comfortable position to snuggle. Huo Xiaoheng rested his chin on the top of her head and slowly caressed it. He felt her soft and smooth hair and took a deep breath. He thought about the upcoming mission and Gu Nianji's unstable emotions. He finally said, "Nianji, I've already submitted a marriage application to the higher-ups." Gu Nianji was dumbfounded. This was the first chapter with 3,000 words. All she wanted was to vote for it. There would be an extra chapter at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General of Chidian app at noon to collect your red packet. You just had to click to the end of this chapter to see the password for the red packet. Chapter 540. What report? Gu Nianji thought she was hearing things and struggled out of Huo Xiaoheng's arms to pick her ears. However, Huo Xiaoheng pressed her against his chest and his voice floated down from above her head. The lights in the car weren't turned on, and the street lamps outside emitted a warm yellow light that made the car even darker. It felt surreal. Gu Nianji was stunned. She only wanted to be in a good relationship. Why did they suddenly talk about marriage? They hadn't even reached the stage where they were passionately in love and couldn't stop themselves from exchanging their hearts for each other. How did they suddenly jump to the end of their relationship? The end of love was either a breakup or a happy ending. They both meant the same thing. Gu Nianji rubbed against Huo Xiaoheng's chest and hugged his strong waist tightly. She muttered, "Marriage is the grave of love." "Huo Xiao, are you sure you want us to go to the grave before our love has even bloomed?" "Nonsense." Huo Xiaoheng patted her head. "Where did you get all these sour and twisted theories from?" "It's true. I've seen psychologists talk about the 3 stages of love." Gu Nianji finally looked up from Huo Xiaoheng's arms and looked into his eyes that were as deep as the night sky. She murmured, "The first stage is the ambiguous stage. The second stage is the stage of passionate love. The third stage is the stage of emotional transformation." "Emotional transformation?" Huo Xiaoheng looked down at her. "What do you mean?" "It's the transformation from love to love. It could be friendship or family or it could be nothing." Gu Nianji spoke eloquently and drew a hook on Huo Xiaoheng's chest with one hand. "There's very little love between a husband and wife. There's more family. The existence of love is short-lived and dazzling. Huo Xiao, let me enjoy the sweetness and excitement of love. You just want to do it a few more times." Huo Xiaoheng lifted her chin with one hand and asked calmly, "Is that right?" "Of course not." Gu Nianji denied it flatly. She tilted her head and moved her chin away from Huo Xiaoheng's fingers. "Huo Xiaoheng raised a finger and pressed it against her lips, successfully stopping her from continuing. "Let me finish. I just submitted the marriage application, and the organization is having a meeting to discuss it. They still need to vote on it and then there will be a background check." Huo Xiaoheng explained the entire process in detail for the first time. Gu Nianji was stunned by what she heard. In the past, she only knew that there was a background check, but now she understood that the background check was an investigation carried out after the marriage was agreed. If the application was rejected, there would be no need for a background check. Her big, bright eyes stared at Huo Xiaoheng without blinking. Her focused expression was childish and serious. Huo Xiaoheng continued, according to normal procedures, it may take half a year for the Standing Committee of the Military Supreme Council to discuss and vote on the final decision. Oh, after the vote is passed, there will be a background check. The process can take anywhere from 1 to 3 years. Huo Xiaoheng glanced at her. So you don't have to worry. You're not getting married tomorrow. You can still take your time and continue to enjoy the sweetness of love. Gu Nianji's face heated up, but she didn't want to be suppressed by Huo Xiaoheng. She said unhappily, "What's wrong with enjoying love? Huo Xiao, how can you slander me?" "I slander you?" "Yes, you're saying that I'm pretentious to enjoy love." Gu Nianji glared at Huo Xiaoheng, but her big eyes were too watery. "You've always been pretentious." Huo Xiaoheng laughed. Seeing that she was about to explode, he whispered in her ear. "Okay, it's okay to be pretentious in front of me, just don't be pretentious in front of others." "Really?" Gu Nianji glanced at Huo Xiaoheng. She couldn't tell from his faint smile whether he was joking or sincere. "You really don't find it annoying?" "I find it annoying, but I don't find it annoying," Huo Xiaoheng said honestly. Gu Nianji choked and turned her head angrily. "You think I'm annoying now? Then why did you submit the marriage application?" "It's for the sake of the people. Just annoy me. Don't annoy others." Huo Xiaoheng locked her against his chest. "Be good. I might have to go abroad for a mission soon." Gu Nianji froze. "You have to go abroad for a mission? You're a major general now, not a soldier. Why do you have to do it yourself?" "Because it's a mission that requires a major general to do it himself." Gu Nianji's lips parted. She really wanted to ask what kind of mission it was for Huo Xiaoheng to do it himself, but she knew that Huo Xiaoheng's work couldn't be told to others. He was already being lenient by telling her that there would be a mission. She struggled in her mind for a long time, but finally decided not to mention it. She hugged Huo Xiaoheng's neck and reminded him, "Be careful and come back soon. I'll wait for you at home." "Okay." Huo Xiaoheng patted her head and tucked her messy hair behind her ear. "You have to be good too. You have to restrain yourself when I'm not in the country. You have to wait for me to come back if you want to be pretentious. Then you have to come back. If you don't, I'll be pretentious with someone else." Gu Nianji sniffled and threatened. "Don't you dare." Huo Xiaoheng glanced at her. "You'll be punished according to the family rules when I come back." "Family rules? Do we have family rules? Why don't I know about it?" Gu Nianji refused to back down and insisted on getting back at him. "You want to know?" Huo Xiaoheng lowered his head to her ear. His voice was husky and suggestive. "Do you want to come back to the apartment with me today? I'll show you the family rules." Gu Nianji's face flushed. Fortunately, it was dark in the car and she couldn't see his face clearly. Otherwise she would be even more embarrassed. "No." She shook her head. "I have to go back to the dormitory. I've taken so many days off and today isn't the weekend. I still have class early tomorrow morning." If she went back with him to enforce the family rules, she would definitely not be able to get out of bed tomorrow. Huo Xiaoheng was indeed the #1 ace of the Special Operations Forces. His stamina was not just for show. After a night of torment, even though Gu Nianji's body was stronger than the average person's, she still couldn't withstand his repeated torment. How would she be able to attend class tomorrow? Gu Nianji didn't want to skip class anymore. Unfortunately, she didn't know that Huo Xiaoheng still had something to do today. Even if she agreed, he actually couldn't accompany her. Huo Xiaoheng was able to spare an hour to have a meal with her. It was already a tight schedule. "Okay, then I'll owe it to you for now. I'll make it up to you when I come back." Huo Xiaoheng chuckled, his fingers gently caressing the edge of Gu Nianji's cheek. The pads of his fingers were slightly calloused, and there was a faint smell of gunpowder between his fingers. It was the smell of a gun. It was a bit pungent, but it made her feel safe. After a while, Gu Nianji finally grunted and said again, "You have to be careful." In the past, Huo Xiaoheng had also gone on missions, but Gu Nianji didn't have this mentality of worrying about personal gains and losses. Their relationship was different now, and so was their mood. Huo Xiaoheng walked her out of the car, and the two of them walked to Gu Nianji's dormitory door. Gu Nianji looked up at him and asked, "When are you leaving?" "When it's time to go." Huo Xiaoheng could only say that much. Gu Nianji watched his car drive away before feeling like she was floating back to her dormitory. Ma Qiqi was already asleep, and the lights in her room were dark. Gu Nianji threw herself on the bed as soon as she entered and buried her head in the pillow. Her heart was full of thoughts. Oh my god. Hu Xiao is going to marry me. But he hasn't even proposed yet? How can he just marry anyone he wants? Okay, Hu Xiao does have the right to marry whoever he wants. Am I going to marry myself just like that? She couldn't sleep for almost the entire night. The two little people in her mind continued to fight, and the dark circles under her eyes were especially serious the next day. When she arrived at Hijichu's office for class, Hijichu immediately saw her sleep-deprived face and asked coldly, "What's wrong? Did you steal last night?" Steal? No. I was sleeping in the dormitory the whole time. Gu Nianji was so sleepy that her brain was slow. She actually didn't understand what Hijichu was implying. Hijichu snickered and brought her a cup of warm milk. Drink some milk to relax. Gu Nianji drank the warm milk and actually felt even more sleepy. She sat on the sofa and listened to Hijichu explain a case and actually fell asleep in a daze. Fortunately, she was the only one in class today, so Hijichu didn't say anything else. He covered her with a thin blanket and went to the study to prepare for class. After Hu Xiaoheng sent Gu Nianji back to university that night, he went to the Senate. Speaker Long and General Ji were waiting for him there. There were many things that weren't explained clearly over the phone, so he had to come for a meeting with them to carefully understand the mission this time. This was the second night. He had to vote for the guaranteed monthly votes of his loved ones. And the recommendation votes. Chapter 541. Walking into Speaker Long's office in the Senate building, Hu Xiaoheng's gaze swept over the antique furnishings in the room. He saluted the two elders in the room. "Hello, Chief." Speaker Long pointed to the sofa across from him. The office staff brought Hu Xiaoheng a cup of tea and placed it on the coffee table in front of him. Of course, Hu Xiaoheng hadn't come here this late to drink tea. He went straight to the point. "Excuse me, Chief, what's going on?" Speaker Long waved his hand. The staff in the room understood and immediately left the office, closing the door behind them. Only Speaker Long, General Ji, and Hu Xiaoheng were left in the room. Speaker Long's expression was solemn. The Prime Minister election will be held in a month. What did the Prime Minister election have to do with the Special Operations Forces? They clearly couldn't interfere with internal affairs and could only manage things outside the country's borders. Hu Xiaoheng glanced at General Ji. Seeing that he didn't comment, he didn't ask further and patiently listened to Speaker Long finish. This time, Prime Minister Do can no longer run. The other candidates have performed very well. Up until now, only two have performed exceptionally well. Hu Xiaoheng knew they were talking about the Minister of the Interior, Bai Jianqing, and the Minister of Justice, Tan Dongbang. No one was surprised by Bai Jianqing. After Prime Minister Do's incident, Bai Jianqing was now leading the cabinet and acting like a temporary prime minister. Everyone thought his election was a done deal, but they didn't expect Tan Dongbang, the Minister of Justice, to suddenly announce his intention to run for the election. He continuously issued several election platforms, claiming to rule the country according to law, and attacking the privileged classes. At the same time, he threw out the ancient wisdom that, if a prince breaks the law, he will be punished the same as the commoners. He unexpectedly won the hearts of the voters. In addition, when he was the Minister of Justice, he was committed to redressing wrongful cases and pushing for the courts to review some controversial cases. Many people were already grateful to him, so when he announced his candidacy, he immediately overshadowed the Minister of the Interior, Bai Jianqing. "The person you mentioned on the phone is related to Minister Tan," Hu Xiaoheng said calmly. "Who is it? Since he wants to run for Prime Minister, did you conduct a strict background check on him? If his immediate family members have emigrated overseas, he won't be eligible to participate, right?" "Of course we've looked into it. The Tans are a large family and many of their collateral relatives are overseas, just like your grandmother's Xie family. However, Tan Dongbang's immediate family members are all Huaxia citizens, but he has a daughter who is studying abroad on a student visa and is not an immigrant. She graduated this summer and originally planned to continue her postgraduate studies abroad, but because her father decided to run for the election last minute, she has to return home before the election, which is the day after her graduation exams." Speaker Long tossed out a document and placed it in front of Hu Xiaoheng. Hu Xiaoheng quietly picked up the documents and flipped through them. "So this is what you meant by urgent matters? You want to send a major general from the Special Operations Forces to bring a female exchange student back to China? He's a commoner with no special privileges." "General Ji," Speaker Long chuckled. Very sharp, Xiaoheng, but I'm not done with this matter yet. I'm all ears. Tan Dongbang's daughter Tan Gurin? Stop, why do you say his daughter is a benefactor? Hua Xiaoheng expressed his confusion again. He didn't know much about the people in the cabinet and even less about the relatives in his family. It's not that his daughter is a benefactor, it's that his daughter is called Gurin. Speaker Long almost cried and knelt down. He was also complaining about what kind of name Tan Dongbang had given his daughter. Why wasn't Gurin called Lucky Star? Hua Xiaoheng paused. Continue. This Tan Gurin is studying violin at Juilliard in the United States. She's always behaved herself and is very obedient. But because her father ran for the prime minister election, she was implicated. Speaker Long's voice lowered as he placed another document in front of Hua Xiaoheng. I just received news that she went missing from her dormitory. Hua Xiaoheng? He glanced at General Ji. General Ji nodded at him. The embassy has already sent people there to investigate. She's indeed missing. Hua Xiaoheng took the documents and flipped through them. As he read, he asked. Even if she really went missing, how do you know it's related to her father's election? Maybe it's just a simple criminal case. Because someone sent a letter to Tan Dongbang, claiming that if he withdrew from the election, his daughter would be able to return safely. If he didn't, his daughter's life would be worse than death. Speaker Long slammed the table and said angrily, I was furious when I saw this letter. This is outrageous. We're the prime minister candidate of a great nation, and yet we're being threatened like this. Is there any law or order? Then why are you looking for me? Hua Xiaoheng sat up straight. You can use the Special Operations Forces personnel in the United States for this kind of thing, but there's no need for me to personally do it, right? He was the head of the Special Operations Forces, so he didn't need to do field investigations. Also, this was discovered by the first-class military officer of our embassy. General Ji suddenly spoke and placed another document in front of Hua Xiaoheng. Take a look. Doesn't it look familiar? Hua Xiaoheng took it and flipped through it again. When he saw the data, his hand suddenly stopped moving. His eyes stared at the string of numbers in a daze. This was a string of magnetic field data. To be precise, it was a set of abnormal magnetic field data. It was the same magnetic field data that Hua Xiaoheng's maternal grandfather, Song Haichuan, and mother, Song Jining, had produced when their experiment failed 17 years ago. It was the same abnormal magnetic field data that Gu Nianji had appeared 7 years ago. It was also the same abnormal magnetic field data that they had discovered in the Somali waters last year. But this time, the location was in the student dormitory at Juilliard in New York. Hua Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat, but he maintained an unmoved expression on his face. Putting away the document, he looked up and said, The Special Operations Forces has been following up on this magnetic field for a long time. We also have people in charge, so it's more appropriate to send them. But in the past, whenever you heard of something like this, you were always the first to ask to investigate. Speaker Long was a bit confused. Why don't you want to go now? Times have changed. Hua Xiaoheng played Tai Chi. He wouldn't tell Speaker Long and General Ji what the real reason was. Since Gu Nianji's family background was already known, the magnetic field data was just a set of data. General Ji and Speaker Long looked at each other, then at Hua Xiaoheng. You're really not interested? You don't want to go? The mission that I'm assigned to is to investigate something that has a major impact on national interests. What impact does the disappearance of a prime minister candidate's daughter have on our national interests? Hua Xiaoheng was unmoved. I can't even finish my own things, so I can't be a police dog to investigate missing people. General Ji and Speaker Long spent a long time talking to Hua Xiaoheng, but they couldn't convince him. In the end, seeing that it was almost dawn, the two of them were old and couldn't hold on much longer. They told him to go back and think about it and then adjourned the meeting. Hua Xiaoheng walked out of the Senate and looked at the golden clouds that had just appeared on the horizon. The red sun was about to erupt. Just as he was thinking about whether or not to go see Gu Nianji again, he heard his phone ring again. This time it was his personal phone. Less than 5 people knew the number. He picked it up and saw that it was actually Qin Lai. Hua Xiao, where are you? Not at the base? Can you come to my office for a bit? Qin Lai's voice was a bit urgent. I'll be right back. Hua Xiaoheng replied simply and hung up. He got into the car and said to Fan Jian, Let's go back to the base. Hua Xiaoheng got into the car and rubbed his forehead. He closed his eyes and slept for a while. He woke up after returning to the base, but didn't return to his official residence. Instead, he went to see Qin Lai. Qin Lai was on the top floor of the medical building in the base. Hua Xiaoheng took the elevator to where Qin Lai worked alone. Qinlai had called him several times yesterday to ask him to go over. He also wanted to see how Gu Xiangwen was doing. In the few days since his return, Qinlai had finally stabilized Gu Xiangwen's condition. His body was slowly recovering. Pushing open the snow-white door of the ward, Hua Xiaoheng poked his head out to look at Gu Xiangwen lying on the hospital bed. There were all kinds of tubes in his body, and the equipment beside the bed was like a workshop. Qinlai was in the office next door and saw Hua Xiaoheng come up through the surveillance screen. He waited for a while before seeing Hua Xiaoheng walk into his office. "You've seen him?" Qinlai rolled his eyes. "He's under my care. What are you worried about?" "I'm not worried. I just wanted to see when he'll wake up." Hua Xiaoheng leaned forward and picked up an apple from the corner of Qinlai's desk. He took a bite. "Sour." He put it down and asked Qinlai, "Why were you looking for me?" Qinlai's brows furrowed. He glanced at Hua Xiaoheng, then looked away guiltily. His eyes darted around the office, but he refused to answer the question. Hua Xiaoheng had been friends with Qinlai for many years. He could tell from his expression that he was in trouble. Fiddling with the bitten apple on the table, Hua Xiaoheng said calmly, "What do you want now? You can't save him, so you're trying to get Nianji? How many times have I warned you that Nianji isn't your lab rat? Don't even think about using her to save Gu Xiangwen. I'll despise you for the rest of my life if you do." Qinlai seemed to have something stuck in his chest. He wanted to say it but he couldn't. His face turned purple. After a while he jumped up from the back of the office and rushed to the door to shut it tightly. He also turned off all the surveillance cameras in his office. Finally he asked Hua Xiaoheng, "Do you have a way to check the hidden surveillance cameras here?" He had something to say and he didn't want anyone to hear or record it. Hua Xiaoheng became serious. This was the headquarters building of the Special Operations Forces. Even he didn't know how many hidden surveillance cameras there were. So if he had something to say that he didn't want others to know, he couldn't do it here. He stood up. "I have something to do. I'll be leaving now." Qinlai understood. He quickly jumped up to grab his coat and put it on. He walked out of his office with Hua Xiaoheng. The two of them took the elevator downstairs and arrived at the spacious square in front of the medical building. As long as they kept their voices down, there was absolutely no way any equipment would be able to eavesdrop. Hua Xiaoheng saw how cautious Qinlai was. Although he didn't show it on his face, he was already mentally prepared. "Tell me what's going on." Qinlai sweated when he was nervous. He took off his glasses and wiped them before putting them back on. He mustered up his courage and said, "Hua Xiao, I'll tell you first. Don't be anxious." "Okay, tell me." "This time I can't even use Nianji's bone marrow. Her DNA doesn't match Gu Xiangwen's." This was the first chapter with 3,400 words. He just wanted to say, "Hurry up and vote for the monthly votes." There would be an additional chapter at 7 p.m. Remember to come to the Major General on the Qidian app at noon to collect your red packets. He just had to click to the end of this chapter to see the password for the red packet. Today was the last day to receive red packets. He could try again. How about asking for a few monthly votes? Chapter 542. Hua Xiaoheng was quiet for a moment before asking, "What does DNA inconsistencies have to do with you using her bone marrow?" "It was fine as long as the bone marrow matched." Qinlai smiled wryly. "I'm telling you one of the results. Not only is the DNA inconsistent, but the bone marrow also doesn't match, so I can't use it even if I wanted to." "You really thought about it? You even tried?" Hua Xiaoheng looked at him coldly. "Are you tired of living? If you want to cause trouble, I'll accompany you." Qinlai was also angry. He squeezed out the words through his teeth. "If I hadn't secretly done a test, you would still be in the dark. When this matter is exposed, all your previous efforts will be wasted." Yes, Gu Nianji's parentage was already set in stone, but this happened. Hua Xiaoheng crossed his arms and slowly walked around the square. He didn't go far. After a while he asked, "What about Gu Xiangwen? Have you confirmed Gu Xiangwen's identity?" "This Gu Xiangwen should be real." Qinlai thought about it. His DNA is the same as Gu Yanran's. They are biological father and daughter. Hua Xiaoheng clenched his fists. Gu Yanran is biological father and daughter? Were all his previous speculations wrong? He originally thought Gu Nianji was biological and Gu Yanran wasn't, but now it was the opposite? After walking around the square a few times, Hua Xiaoheng thought of He Jichu's method. He used proof that Gu Nianji was the youngest daughter of the Gu family, not proof that she was Gu Xiangwen's biological daughter. And Gu Yanran also admitted that Gu Nianji was her little sister, Gu Nianji. What did this mean? It meant that Gu Nianji was legally a daughter of the Gu family, right? But if Gu Nianji wasn't Gu Xiangwen's biological daughter, and Gu Yanran was, the consequences would be too severe. Hua Xiaoheng knew how much the higher-ups in the military coveted Gu Xiangwen's research results and patents. He also knew how much it would benefit national security. He also knew that once this was revealed, Gu Yanran's status would rise and become more important than Gu Nianji. No, this couldn't happen. Hua Xiaoheng narrowed his eyes and stopped walking. He turned to look at Qinlai, who didn't know what to do, and said calmly, "This ends here. Don't tell anyone. Remember, you've never taken this test before. Destroy all the records." "All right." Qinlai nodded. "You have an idea?" Nianji is indeed Gu Xiangwen's daughter. There's no doubt about her legal status. Hua Xiaoheng said firmly, "As for whether she's his biological daughter or not, so what? Even Gu Yanran acknowledged her identity." "That's true. Maybe Nianji is Gu Xiangwen's wife's biological daughter?" Qinlai murmured. "It's a pity we can't get Gu Xiangwen's wife's information and blood sample, otherwise, you don't have to worry about that." Hua Xiaoheng vaguely felt that this matter wasn't that simple, but he needed it to be simple at the moment. The marriage application had already been submitted, but her father, Hua Guanchen, was still objecting. However, the military bosses all believed that Gu Nianji was Gu Xiangwen's biological daughter and had always supported Hua Xiaoheng. Once the news that Gu Nianji wasn't related to Gu Xiangwen got out, it would only be a matter of time before the military bosses backed off. Then his father, Hua Guanchen, would have the final say in the matter of Hua Xiaoheng's marriage. Marriage applications could be rejected immediately. Hua Xiaoheng crossed his arms and walked around the square a few more times. The early summer sun had risen, bringing with it the dry heat of summer. The trees around the square were covered in shade, but it couldn't dispel the newly arrived summer heat. Hua Xiaoheng's heart also began to heat up. "You must keep this a secret. Keep it for as long as you can." Hua Xiaoheng clenched his fists and finally made up his mind. He said decisively, "I have to go abroad this month. Remember, Gu Xiangwen is using his serious illness as an excuse to temporarily reject all visits." "Okay, that's not a problem." Qinlai nodded. "That's easy, but as for Gu Yanran, if she says it herself, she might not say it for now as long as we don't provoke her." Hua Xiaoheng had some understanding of Gu Yanran. "We just need to stabilize her for at least 3 days." Qinlai could tell that Hua Xiaoheng was planning something, but he didn't want to ask. "Think about it carefully. Do you want to remind Nianji?" "No need. She won't remember anyway." Hua Xiaoheng returned to normal. "I'm leaving." Returning to his office, Hua Xiaoheng said to Zhao Liangzi, "Send me Tan Dongbang's family situation." "Tan Dongbang? Minister of Justice? Popular candidate for Prime Minister?" Zhao Liangzi laughed. "Hua Xiao, you have a wide range of interests." Hua Xiaoheng didn't even look at him as he walked straight into his office. Zhao Liangzi rubbed his nose and immediately searched for all of Tan Dongbang's information from the database before sending it to Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng had only read for a while when General Ji called again and advised him earnestly, "Xiaoheng, this is a serious matter. You should think about it carefully and personally make a trip to the United States." "General Ji, I need a reason." Hua Xiaoheng's tone wasn't as firm as before. "Why do you insist on me going?" General Ji choked. He originally wanted to brush him off, but he remembered that he and Speaker Long had spent the entire night trying to persuade him, but Hua Xiaoheng still wouldn't budge. A random excuse probably wouldn't convince Hua Xiaoheng. "You really want to know?" "Of course." Hua Xiaoheng's cursor lightly clicked on Minister of Justice Tan Dongbang's information and flipped through it one by one. Tan Dongbang's family had a long history of learning. His parents were both leading figures in the Wuxia Empire's legal field, but they had always been famous in the academic world. The Tans were a scholarly family, and Tan Dongbang was the first person in the Tan's family to pursue an official career. Tan Dongbang's wife, Kai Songyin, was from the Wuxia Empire's literary family, the Kai family. Their ancestors were especially famous in the education world, and many of the current senior government leaders had received favors from the Kai family in the past and were grateful to them to this day. And they only had one daughter, Tan Guiran. "Xiaoheng, it was actually Mrs. Tan who suggested that you personally help them find their daughter. As parents, of course they want to give their children the best treatment. They need to find the best doctor to enter the hospital, and they need to find the best school and the best teacher to go to school. Also, this matter is indeed strange, so I'll be reassured if you personally do it." General Ji was already so old, yet he still tried to persuade Hua Xiaoheng in a humble voice. Hua Xiaoheng remained silent as he stared at the information on the computer screen. General Ji was still nagging. Xiaoheng, if you personally find Tan Guren, both the Tans and the Kai family will owe you a favor. If Tan Dongbang can be elected prime minister, your future will be even better in the next 5 years. Although Hua Xiaoheng was in the military, if Tan Dongbang was elected prime minister, he would be the head of the country in name. The appointment and rank of general in the military also required the approval of the cabinet. If the cabinet led by the prime minister didn't agree, he still wouldn't be promoted. Hua Xiaoheng didn't care about all this. If he cared, he would have agreed yesterday. He wouldn't have had to keep arguing with Speaker Long and General Ji. But the information he just learned from Chen Lai made him change his mind. After reading the information for a long time, General Ji's mouth was dry from all the persuasion. Just as he was about to give up, Hua Xiaoheng spoke. General Ji, it's not impossible for me to go personally. But I have a condition. What condition? Tell me. General Ji was overjoyed. It felt great to have such a turnaround. If the military can immediately approve my marriage application and complete Nianji's background check before I leave the country, I will go. Hua Xiaoheng's fingers unconsciously tapped on the desk. He was a bit nervous, but his expression didn't show it at all. What? General Ji was stunned. Don't tell me you don't know how long the process will take? How can you make such a request? You don't agree? Then forget it. Hua Xiaoheng pretended to hang up. Xiaoheng, be reasonable. How can your business and Tangairen's business be the same? General Ji composed himself and began to argue with him. I originally wanted to go personally because some people wanted to use me as a favor. So why can't I make this request? Hua Xiaoheng smiled. He already saw a glimmer of hope. How can those people who came up with ideas for the Tans not pay a price? You have to know that if we go, we will be risking our lives to help them repay their favor. This was the second night. You must vote for your relatives' guaranteed monthly votes. And recommendation votes. Chapter 543. That was how things worked in this world. Even if you went through the back door and asked someone to do something for you, they wouldn't be willing to do anything for you just because you said a few words. Everything had to be exchanged. If you wanted to take something, you had to give it first. This was an exchange of benefits. General Ji held the phone and was speechless for a long time. Finally he coughed heavily. Then I'll discuss it with them again. He hung up and immediately said to his personal secretary, I'm going out for a while. Call them and ask if they're home. As she spoke, she pushed a name list towards the personal secretary and said, Call everyone except Hua Guanchen. The personal secretary looked at it and saw that it was the members of the Standing Committee of the Military Supreme Council. He didn't think too much about it and went to call them one by one. There were a total of 15 people in the Standing Committee, including General Ji and Hua Guanchen. Hua Guanchen didn't need to call them, so he only needed to make 13 calls. Soon the calls were made one by one. 7 of them were home and could see General Ji. The other 6 had work to do, so they arranged to meet the next day. General Ji ran around for 2 whole days to discuss with these people about Hua Xiaoheng's matter. There had to be a reason why such a complicated matter could be agreed in 2 days. The main reason was that these people wanted Gu Xiangwen to stay in the Huaxia Empire and wanted Hua Xiaoheng to marry Gu Nianji. Gu Xiangwen wasn't a citizen of the Huaxia Empire to begin with. Although he was registered now, he could give it up at any time after he came to his senses. Only blood ties couldn't be given up or severed. Previously, they had been dragging their feet on Hua Xiaoheng's marriage application. It wasn't that they didn't agree, but that they didn't want to embarrass Hua Guanchen. Gu Nianji was still young and had just reached the legal age for marriage. Even if they agreed and passed the background check, they wouldn't get married immediately. Therefore no one was in a hurry. This way they wouldn't offend Hua Guanchen or embarrass Hua Xiaoheng too much. It was a tacit understanding. Now that General Ji stated Hua Xiaoheng's conditions, they finally understood that Hua Xiaoheng was already angry and dissatisfied. Also, they needed Hua Xiaoheng's help for many things in the future. The Tans was only one of them. Their future would be smoother if this matter was handled well. Since everyone had laid out their conditions, the result was very simple. At the regular meeting of the Supreme Military Council, Hua Xiaoheng's marriage application was approved with a record of 14 votes in favor and 1 against. Hua Guanchen's face was livid when he saw the results, but he couldn't say a word. In the face of such an outcome, if he still objected, then he would really be a fool. But within a few days, these people had suddenly changed direction. It must have been his precious son who had done something. Thinking of this, Hua Guanchen felt proud and angry, but there was nothing he could do. The organization had already made a decision, so it was impossible to change it. In other words, it was too difficult to change it. Even if all the members of the standing committee worked together, they wouldn't be able to change it. There was no news for another 3 days. No phone calls, no text messages, and no one came to see her. However, this time, Gu Nianji didn't feel anxious and uneasy. She hadn't seen him for a day because the shock Hua Xiaoheng had given her that day hadn't faded. Why were they getting married? Gu Nianji sat in front of her computer writing her thesis and spaced out again. Looking up at the bright summer sun outside the window, her large eyes naturally narrowed to avoid the stimulation of the bright light. Looking down at what she had written, it was a complete mess. She didn't know what to make of it. She still felt uneasy. Gu Nianji stopped writing and closed the program. She went to the small fridge to find a dragon fruit and cut it open. She smeared some honey on it and placed it in a white porcelain bowl. She carried it to Ma Qiqi's room. "Qiqi, do you want some dragon fruit?" Ma Qiqi opened the door with a sleepy expression. "Nianji, it's Saturday today. Why are you up so early?" Looking at her watch, it wasn't even 8 yet. If they didn't go home on weekends and stayed in the dorms, they usually slept until 9 o'clock. Gu Nianji giggled and dragged the white porcelain bowl to Ma Qiqi. "Look, it's a dripping dragon fruit. It's fragrant, soft, and sweet. There's also wild honey. Do you want some?" "Yes." Ma Qiqi perked up and nodded firmly. "I'll be out after I wash my face." Gu Nianji sat at the dining table and took 2 forks to place on the dragon fruit, one for each of them. Soon after, Ma Qiqi came and sat across from her at the dining table. She picked up a fork and ate with her. This dragon fruit is really good. It's so juicy and so sticky. It's even more sticky than the ones I've had before." Ma Qiqi's cheeks puffed up as she ate. Gu Nianji was in a good mood and stopped eating after 2 bites. She watched Ma Qiqi eat and stared at her without blinking. Ma Qiqi ate a few pieces and said to Gu Nianji, "Nianji, why didn't you go home this weekend? Didn't your boyfriend come to pick you up?" Gu Nianji was a bit distracted and didn't hear what Ma Qiqi said. Ma Qiqi knocked on the table. "Nianji, something's on your mind?" "Oh?" Gu Nianji snapped back to reality. She wanted to hide her panic, but she also felt like she had a stomach full of things to confide in someone. She grew up with Hua Xiaoheng and the others and used to discuss everything with Yin Shixiang, Zhao Liangzi, or Hua Xiaoheng. But now that she was older, she couldn't confide in the men about her worries. When she was an undergraduate, she had Little Temptress, Lady Chow, and Green Tea Fong to give her advice. But at that time, she didn't have the worries she wanted to talk about now. After a while, Gu Nianji finally asked, "Qiqi, what age do you think is a good time to get married?" "Get married?" Ma Qiqi froze. Although she was older than Gu Nianji, she was only 23. She had just ended a relationship and hadn't started a new one yet. Marriage was still too far away for her. She laughed strangely. "Nianji, you're only 18. You're not even 19 yet, right? What marriage? You're so young and you're going to be an old woman?" According to the Huaxia Empire's marriage laws, people could get married at 18. Gu Nianji laughed. Ma Qiqi's thoughts were exactly the same as hers. They were both young girls who hadn't entered society yet. To them, their beautiful lives had only just begun. They were still at the stage of judging men based on their looks. Their imagination of love was all about romance, and they had to trap the man in their imagination. If the man didn't match up with their imagination, they would have all sorts of complaints. Greed, anger, love, and obsession were all they wanted for love. "Qiqi, you're really good with words." Gu Nianji thought about it and changed the topic. She was worried Ma Qiqi would continue asking. "Alright, how have you been lately? Did you get a new boyfriend? I came back from the library last night and saw you talking to a tall, elegant boy under the tree downstairs. Your smile was so gentle." "Oh? You saw?" Ma Qiqi screamed and covered her face in embarrassment. No, he's not my new boyfriend, but..." She put down her hand and looked at Gu Nianji innocently. She leaned over and whispered in her ear, "But he seems to be interested in me. Then do you like him?" Gu Nianji asked curiously. "Is he pursuing you?" Gu Nianji had never been pursued before. She was the one who initiated it with Hua Xiaoheng, so she didn't know what it felt like to be pursued. Sometimes she couldn't even tell if Hua Xiaoheng truly loved her, or if it was because he was used to taking care of her, getting used to her pestering, and getting used to her being his responsibility and obligation. Ma Qiqi closed her eyes. "I don't know. He's pretty good to me. I'll see. Then what else do you want?" Gu Nianji was very curious. "Isn't it enough for him to treat you well?" "Of course not," Ma Qiqi said seriously. "I still have to like him and be moved. If he's only nice to me and I don't feel anything, then being with him out of gratitude would be a form of humiliation and irresponsibility to him. Really? Gu Nianji's eyes began to drift. Then how do you know if he loves you? It's very simple. Ma Qiqi's eyes suddenly lit up like a resplendent crystal chandelier. She cupped her slightly flushed cheeks with both hands and said intoxicatedly, "Yes, I'll always think of you when I don't see you, and I'll have to see you no matter what. If we're not together, then morning call in the morning and night call at night are essential. As for you, you almost can't breathe when you see him. All the beautiful things you imagined in the past can't be shown to him because you're already out of your mind. You can't control your every word and action and your emotions." Gu Nianji was speechless. She sounded like a retard. Gu Nianji frowned and thought about it. She regretfully realized that the retard was herself. In front of Hua Xiaoheng, she was the retard that Ma Qiqi described. Would Hua Xiaoheng have a hard time holding it in? It seemed like she really loved Hua Xiaoheng, but she still couldn't tell if Hua Xiaoheng loved her that much. In the past, she had vowed that she would make Hua Xiaoheng love her as much as she loved him. However, after the incident in the blue hole, she felt that it was probably impossible. In Hua Xiaoheng's heart, comrades and missions were all more important than her. That day, she curled up in the corner of the yacht with her entire body aching and unable to move. All she could see was Hua Xiaoheng's back as he hurried away. She had to admit that the scene had such a huge impact on her that she still hadn't recovered from it. The insecurities in her subconscious grew even more severe. Was it because she was at odds with Hua Xiaoheng because of this that Hua Xiaoheng wanted to use marriage to appease her? However, he didn't understand that she didn't want this kind of peace of mind. She wanted his true feelings. What if it was possible that Hua Xiaoheng would fall in love with someone else? A woman who was more mature, magnanimous, good-tempered, skillful, smooth, and more beautiful than her? If there was such a woman, what should she do? Hand Hua Xiaoheng over and dejectedly leave? Gu Nianji thought about it and realized that there were only 4 words. She couldn't. This was the first 3,000-word update. Today was Monday and recommendation votes were especially important. Remember to vote. There would be an extra update at 7 p.m. Chapter 544. So that's how it is. Gu Nianji smiled. Qiqi, you must have a lot of suitors, right? That's not a lot. Ma Qiqi blushed and looked up to see Gu Nianji's large and bright eyes, her fair and soft cheeks, her straight and handsome nose, and her naturally red lips. She said enviously, "A girl as beautiful as Nianji must have even more suitors. Why did you choose that one?" "My one? Who am I?" Gu Nianji also blushed and waved her hand. No one else is pursuing me." Gu Nianji suddenly thought of Mei Xiaowen and calmly eliminated him from the list of suitors. To Gu Nianji, being pursued by someone you liked was considered a pursuit. Being pursued by someone you didn't like was harassment. She only wanted Hua Xiaoheng to pursue her, but later realized it was impossible. No way? Our Nianji is smart and beautiful, are those men blind? But luckily your boyfriend has good taste and got you early on. Ma Qiqi smiled and pinched Gu Nianji's face. "Look at this pretty little face, I can't bear to let it go." Gu Nianji quickly tilted her head to avoid Ma Qiqi's Lushan claws, and pinched her nose. "If we're talking about beauty, our Qiqi is the best. Look at this flirtatious expression. Even a woman like me can't resist it." The two of them fooled around in the dormitory. They were young after all, so they quickly forgot about their worries. To them, life was a kaleidoscope that constantly gave them surprises. Taking a step back was gorgeous and taking a step forward was wonderful. Even the dark clouds were lined with silver. On Sunday morning, Hijichu woke up in his bedroom and didn't want to open his eyes. He laid there quietly for a while before taking out his phone from the bedside table and unlocking it to check the time. It was only 8, so he didn't want to get up yet. He had taken care of some family matters last night and had been busy until almost midnight before sleeping. He didn't expect to wake up at 8 this morning. What a scary biological clock. When he turned on his phone, he habitually looked at the GPS and immediately sat up in bed. The GPS actually showed Gu Nianji was on campus. This was too rare. Ever since Gu Nianji started school, she had been away from school most weekends. It was one of the few weekends when she stayed at school. Ijichu looked at his phone for a while before putting it down and falling asleep again. So what if I'm at school? Was he going to ask her to spend the weekend with him? Right now they were just a professor and a student. There was no other relationship between them. Ijichu reminded himself silently. He slept again, and when he woke up it was almost noon. He slowly got out of bed, went to the bathroom to take a shower, and then came out to make himself a cup of coffee. He only sobered up after drinking the coffee. Hijichu looked at the computer and didn't really want to continue working. He took out his phone and looked at it again. Gunyenji was at the school's tennis court. It seemed like he hadn't played tennis for many days. Well, he needed some exercise. Hijichu went to his bedroom and changed into his tennis attire and tennis shoes. With a tennis bag on his back and a tennis racket in one hand, he walked down the professor's building. Hijichu drove to the tennis court and parked his car in the underground parking lot before taking the elevator up. Gunyenji and Machichi were playing in court number 4. Both of them wore snow-white tennis attire and white sports socks. Their fair, slender legs ran and jumped on the court, exuding a strong sense of youth. Hijichu calmly walked past their tennis court with his racket in hand. He didn't look around. Gunyenji's back was facing the aisle, but Machichi was facing the aisle. She looked up and saw Hijichu walking over. She froze and forgot to catch the ball. Gunyenji almost hit her. "Chichi, are you okay?" Gunyenji was shocked. She quickly ran to the net and asked with concern. Machichi desperately gave Gunyenji a look and almost stabbed her in the back with her racket. Gunyenji was baffled. She turned around and saw that it was Hijichu. He happened to turn his head and their eyes met. "Professor He? You're here to play tennis too?" Gunyenji greeted him with a smile and waved her racket. "Do you want to play 2 rounds? Play with me? Are you sure?" Hijichu smiled faintly and nodded to Machichi as a greeting. He then looked at Gunyenji's flushed face and forehead still glistening with sweat from the exercise. He raised his hand and couldn't help but want to wipe it for her. Gunyenji took a step back and continued with a smile. "What's wrong? Professor, he is a world-class player, but I'm not weak either." Only Gunyenji could be so confident. Hijichu couldn't help but laugh. "Okay then, 2 rounds. Machichi also walked over and quickly said, "Professor He, Nyenji is a little monster. She's too energetic and I'm no match for her at all. I hope Professor He can teach her a lesson. Otherwise she doesn't know her place." Gunyenji smiled and gently hit Machichi's back with her racket. "You've lost to me and you still want to tell on me? How is this telling on me? I just found someone strong to teach you a lesson." Machichi winked at her and walked to the side of the court to sit down. She picked up a bottle of mineral water and took a big gulp. Gunyenji and Hijichu were already standing on opposite sides of the court to begin the match. Gunyenji started first. She tossed the snow-white tennis ball high up and raised her racket to hit it fiercely. The tennis ball bounced off the other side like a bullet. Hijichu looked elegant and didn't look like an athlete. However, as soon as he swung his racket to catch the ball, Gunyenji knew she had made a huge mistake. Hijichu had a strong jump and his judgment when catching the ball was shockingly accurate. Gunyenji could hear the wind whistling in her ears when he swung his racket hard. What a strong opponent. Gunyenji perked up and focused all her attention on playing against Hijichu. On Saturday morning, the headquarters of the Special Operations Forces was quiet. Most people were enjoying Saturday mornings when they didn't have to wake up early for training. However, Hua Xiaoheng woke up at 7 as usual and browsed through his emails as he ate breakfast. Unless there was an emergency, he usually didn't deal with any emails. After breakfast, he went out for a morning run. It was already early summer. Although the heat in the morning wasn't very strong, it was still much hotter than before. Hua Xiaoheng had just run 1 lap and his forehead and back were already beaded with sweat. "Hua Xiao, General Ji is calling. Do you want to take it?" Zhao Yang's voice came through the Bluetooth headset. "I'll take it." Hua Xiaoheng slowed down and put his hands in his pockets as he walked slowly on the dark green oval track. The Bluetooth headset connected to General Ji's call and he heard General Ji's hearty laughter. "Xiaoheng, are you up?" "Good morning, Chief." Hua Xiaoheng smiled. "I woke up a long time ago and am running now." "Running on the weekend?" "Ha ha ha." General Ji was in a good mood. "You really are the best soldier under my command." The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's mouth twitched. This was considered a good soldier? General Ji's standards were really low. He casually exchanged a few pleasantries and heard General Ji say happily, "Xiaoheng, the results of Gunyenji's background check are out." Hua Xiaoheng's heart skipped a beat. He walked to the stone bench beside the track and sat down. "Really? That's pretty efficient." "Of course it's efficient. The Standing Committee of the Military Supreme Council authorized urgent processing. How could it not be fast?" General Ji said proudly. The military unanimously approved the marriage of Gunyenji and Hua Xiaoheng. "Oh? Then Yenji's background check is fine?" Hua Xiaoheng asked in detail. "I asked for it to be fast, but I didn't ask you to lower your standards. I want to know the level and results of Nianji's background check. What level was it? You're really watertight. General G scolded jokingly and assured him, it was all the highest level. Her background check results were completely fine. It was the best. Really? Hua Xiaoheng sat up straight. Then give me a copy of the background check report. I want to file it. Documents had to be written in black and white for it to be effective. Hua Xiaoheng knew this very well. Sure, no problem. General G was going to do him a favor. When are you coming to collect it? I'll be right there. Hua Xiaoheng looked at his watch. I'll be there in about half an hour. He then said, in addition to the background check report, please also get me a marriage recommendation letter. Why are you in such a hurry? General G was very confused. Don't tell me you want to get married right away? There's not enough time. You didn't prepare a new house or a treat. You didn't even prepare a wedding dress, right? Hua Xiaoheng laughed. I just want to get the paperwork ready. I'm not getting married right away. General G, you're thinking too much. It was the second night. Today was Monday. His relatives also had to vote for him. And monthly votes. Chapter 545. Really? General G didn't seem to believe Hua Xiaoheng's words. He had been tricked by Hua Xiaoheng for the past 2 days and was surprised to find that even he couldn't figure out what Hua Xiaoheng was thinking. Absolutely. Hua Xiaoheng said slowly, a mysterious smile on his lips. He had a pen in his hand and was occasionally poking at the white paper in front of him, leaving a cloud of fog on it. General G thought about it for a while. Since the marriage application and background check had been approved, it was only a matter of time before the marriage recommendation letter was issued. Why stop him at this point? Moreover, Hua Xiaoheng wasn't young anymore. General G nodded in understanding. Okay, I'll have Secretary Chao take you through the procedures. He paused and tried to scare him again. Nianji is still young. You have to think about the impact. It's best if you wait for her father to wake up before getting married. Wouldn't it be nice to have her biological father at her wedding? Don't you think so? Yeah. Hua Xiaoheng nodded calmly. I said I don't plan to get married right away. I can't do anything if General G doesn't believe me. Okay, it's not that I don't believe you, I'm just reminding you. Actually, it'll save us a lot of trouble if you handle all the procedures yourself. General G chuckled for a long time before putting down the phone. Hua Xiaoheng didn't hesitate and immediately returned to his official residence to take a shower. Then he took his various documents and drove alone to where the Supreme Military Council was located. Although it was a Saturday because Hua Xiaoheng's matter was a special case, the staff on duty dutifully pulled out the documents for him. Hua Xiaoheng checked his documents in the conference room and looked through them one by one. He didn't miss a single word. The marriage application had the signatures of 14 executive officers, and the background check materials also had the executive officer's seal and the file number. He also carefully checked the level of the background check to make sure it was the highest level before stopping. Because only the highest level of background check could guarantee the lowest possibility of being overturned in the future. Hua Xiaoheng silently put the 2 documents into his briefcase and stood up to say to General G's personal secretary, Secretary Chao. Thank you, Secretary Chao. It's okay. General Hua is too polite. Secretary Chao was a middle-aged man in his 40s. He looked at him with a smile. I'll take General Hua to get the recommendation letter now. Yes, thank you. Hua Xiaoheng picked up his briefcase and followed Secretary Chao to the military's executive secretary's office to get a certificate and a letter of introduction. He was an active soldier and a high-ranking officer. His marriage required a special letter of introduction and proof from the organization. Not only was it a guaranteed military marriage, but there was also a special confidentiality procedure. Hua Xiaoheng secretly breathed a sigh of relief as he watched the first secretary from the secretary's office stamp the marriage introduction letter and certificate with a bright red seal. In the future, with this letter of introduction, ID and military ID, he could register his marriage with Gu Nianji anytime. The most suspenseful part had been resolved just like that. Hua Xiaoheng realized he was more relaxed than he had imagined. So this matter was also deeply suppressed in his heart? The corners of Hua Xiaoheng's lips curled into a smile as he placed his briefcase in the passenger seat. He started the car and left the headquarters of the Supreme Military Council. As the car entered the San Juan Expressway, Hua Xiaoheng turned on his Bluetooth headset and called Gu Nianji's cell phone. It rang for a long time but no one picked up. He looked at his watch. It was almost noon. Was Gu Nianji, the lazy bum, still sleeping in? Hua Xiaoheng thought about it and took out his phone to open the location tracking system. Gu Nianji was represented by a small four-leaf clover. On the map on his phone, the location of the small four-leaf clover was inside the B University Stadium. She was actually working out in the stadium? Hua Xiaoheng knew how much Gu Nianji hated exercise, so he couldn't help but glance at the sun outside the car window. The sun didn't rise from the west. As he thought about it, he turned the steering wheel and was already driving in the direction of B University. When it was almost 1, Hua Xiaoheng arrived at the entrance of the B University Stadium. He stopped the car and got out. Looking at his phone again, he saw that the small four-leaf clover was already heading towards the entrance of the stadium. Hua Xiaoheng put away his phone and leaned against the shiny black car door. He lit a cigarette and took a long drag. With one hand on the car and the other holding the cigarette, he stared fixedly at the entrance of the stadium. Not long after, Gu Nianji, Ma Qiqi and He Zhichu walked out of the stadium chatting and laughing. He Zhichu's expression was indifferent as he casually said, "Have you had lunch?" "No. Is Professor He treating us to lunch?" Ma Qiqi's eyes lit up as she quietly nudged Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji pursed her lips into a smile and shook her head. "Qiqi, you're overthinking it. What Professor He means is that he wants to eat so we can all go home and find our own mothers." He Zhichu glanced at her. "Did I say that?" He paused and said, "I heard there's a good Hubei restaurant outside the south gate. Do you guys like Hubei cuisine?" Yes. Ma Qiqi nodded repeatedly. "Professor He likes Hubei cuisine too?" He Zhichu didn't really like it or dislike it, but Gu Nianji liked it. He didn't look at Gu Nianji, but his tone was directed at her. "Since you like it, let's go together." "Is boring eating alone?" Gu Nianji smiled and shook her head. She suddenly saw a familiar figure from the corner of her eye. "No way? At this time? At this place? Why was he here?" Gu Nianji thought she had missed him so much that her eyes had gone haywire and everyone looked like him. However, that person's aura was too strong. Although it was only a glimpse, she couldn't help but look again. After taking another look, Gu Nianji's eyes suddenly widened. It really was him. It was Hua Xiao. She almost couldn't control herself from sprinting over. Fortunately, Ma Qiqi and He Zhichu were beside her, so her remaining bit of rationality pulled her back. She still followed Ma Qiqi and He Zhichu down the steps unhurriedly. Then she walked in Hua Xiaoheng's direction. Although she walked normally for the first few steps, she walked faster and faster towards the end. She practically jogged to Hua Xiaoheng, who was leaning against the car door. Gu Nianji panted slightly and said, "Hua Xiao, why are you here?" Hua Xiaoheng saw her as soon as she came out of the door. He originally wanted to walk over to give her a surprise, but he saw that other than her roommate Ma Qiqi, He Zhichu was also accompanying her. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes darkened, but he didn't move. He looked at Gu Nianji with a deep gaze and grunted. "I came here for a meeting, so I came to see you." "Really?" Gu Nianji smiled so much that her eyes turned into crescents. Fine beads of sweat seeped from her forehead, and a few strands of sweaty hair curled on the side of her face. Her small face was delicate and pink, and her eyes were as bright as stars. Hua Xiaoheng reached out to smooth her hair. "You're all sweaty. Why didn't you shower before coming out?" "I'm not used to showering in the gym shower, so I wanted to go back to the dorm to shower," Gu Nianji said quickly. Then she remembered He Zhichu and Ma Qiqi and turned to look at them apologetically. "Professor He Qiqi, I can't go to lunch with you guys." He Zhichu looked at Hua Xiaoheng coolly and said coldly, "Mr. Hua is here. Let's go for lunch together?" Ma Qiqi also desperately gave Gu Nianji a look. Gu Nianji choked and sneaked a look at Hua Xiaoheng. She whispered, "Hua Xiao, do you want to go together?" Hua Xiaoheng thought about it and said, "You all want to shower, right? We can go eat after showering." He didn't mean to refuse. He Zhichu relaxed his brows and said to Gu Nianji and Ma Qiqi, "Nianji, Qiqi, go back and change first, then go to the Hubei restaurant outside the south gate. I've already made reservations there." Since He Zhichu said so, and Hua Xiaoheng didn't object, Gu Nianji boldly agreed. Hua Xiaoheng started the car and opened the door for Gu Nianji and Ma Qiqi to get in. He sent them back to the dorm to shower and change. When he closed the door, Hua Xiaoheng said to He Zhichu, "Professor He plays tennis with the students on the weekends. What a model teacher." The corners of He Zhichu's mouth twitched, but he couldn't bring himself to smile. "Mr. Hua, you flatter me. See you later." He waved and walked to the parking lot. Hua Xiaoheng got into his car and drove Gu Nianji and Ma Qiqi to the dorm. Ma Qiqi only felt a bit awkward when she got into Hua Xiaoheng's car. She realized that Gu Nianji and her boyfriend didn't speak much in the car, and she felt like she was sitting on pins and needles. As soon as she got to the dorm, she rushed out of the car and hurried to the dorm building's main entrance. When she was at the entrance, she ran into the senior who was interested in her. "Chichi? Where did you go? I called you but you didn't pick up." The senior had been waiting for her for a while. In the beginning he was very worried that something had happened to her, but now that he saw her, he sighed in relief. Ma Chichi blushed and raised her tennis racket. "I went to play tennis." "What's up, senior?" The senior's handsome face was also a bit red, but he still mustered up the courage to say, "I wanted to take you to a movie. Are you free?" "A movie? It's only noon now." Ma Chichi was a bit confused. "Shouldn't movies usually be at night?" "Yeah, I bought tickets for the movie tonight, so we're going to eat first. We can watch the movie after eating." The senior seemed to have come prepared. This way the two of them could spend more time together. Ma Chichi understood what he meant and blushed even more. She turned around and saw that Gu Nianji and her boyfriend were still in the car. She suddenly had an idea. "Sure. Give me 5 minutes, I'll go change." She had just taken a cold shower in the gym, unlike Gu Nianji who was still drenched in sweat. "Yeah, I'll wait for you." The senior visibly relaxed and smiled even more beautifully. Ma Chichi's face was as red as a ripe apple. She quickly ran into the elevator and quickly rushed to her dorm room. She quickly changed into a dress and brushed some rose powder on her face before carrying her small bag downstairs. 4 minutes and 50 seconds. Ma Chichi pointed at her watch. "Senior, you don't mind, right?" "I don't mind." The senior shook his head. "Let's go. There's a waffling restaurant at the south gate. Do you like sushi?" "Of course." Ma Chichi was a foodie. As long as it was delicious, she would eat it with relish. As Ma Chichi walked, she texted Gu Nianji and He Jichu separately. "Professor He/Nianji, I'm busy so I can't go eat. Have fun." In Huo Xiaoheng's car, Gu Nianji's phone rang. She looked down to see it was a text from Ma Chichi. "What's up?" Huo Xiaoheng had been sitting in the car silently for a long time. When he heard Gu Nianji's phone ring, he finally turned to ask. This was the first 3,000-word update. A reminder to everyone about the monthly and recommendation votes. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. Chapter 546. The nearly 5 minutes of silence in the car had already caused Gu Nianji to feel heavy pressure. Huo Xiaoheng suddenly spoke and Gu Nianji almost trembled in fear. This obvious cowering had another meaning in Huo Xiaoheng's eyes. He silently turned his head to look out the window and said, "Go shower first." His temples were slightly swollen, and the curve of his jaw was particularly square. He used a commanding tone and had the natural aura of a superior. Gu Nianji pouted and glanced sideways at Huo Xiaoheng. Just as she was about to silently criticize him, Huo Xiaoheng happened to turn around and saw her slanted eyes. Her natural charm made his entire body tense up in that instant. His large hand caressed her cheek and pressed the corners of her eyes to make her slanted eyes level before letting go. He looked forward and said in a low voice, "Get out." Gu Nianji really wanted to suddenly open the door and rush out, then slam the door on Huo Xiaoheng's face. His expression would definitely be very good. Unfortunately, she only dared to think about it. Huo Xiaoheng's dark eyes looked over and didn't say anything, and she was already terrified. Gu Nianji averted her gaze and placed her hand on the handle. Just as she was about to open the door, she saw Ma Chichi dressed up nicely and carrying a small coral Philip 3.1 backpack. She was smiling as she walked towards the tree-lined path with the elegant senior she had seen before. Ma Chichi already left? Gu Nianji's heart skipped a beat. She turned to look at Huo Xiaoheng and whispered, "Huo Xiao, do you want to come to my dorm for a while? I might need some time to shower." Huo Xiaoheng didn't look at her and looked straight in the direction of the car window. His voice was also very solemn. "No, your roommate is there. It's not convenient." "Chichi just left. She went out with someone?" Gu Nianji murmured. "It's just me." She then opened the door and got out. Huo Xiaoheng thought about it and turned off the engine. He took out the car key and got out from the other side. He had already locked the briefcase in the car. The two of them walked into the dorm building's elevator one after the other. Watching the numbers on the elevator rise one by one, it was like the words rolling in her throat had reached the end before she could say them. The elevator doors opened, and Gu Nianji looked at Huo Xiaoheng before walking out with him. This wasn't the first time Huo Xiaoheng had come to Gu Nianji's dorm. Since it was noon on a weekend, there was almost no one in the hallway. The two of them walked along the quiet hallway and quickly entered their dorm. The living room was clean and tidy. Ma Chichi's dorm room door was half open, but there was no one inside. It was obvious that she had left in such a hurry that she had forgotten to lock the door. Hua Xiaoheng's sharp gaze swept over Ma Qiqi's dorm as if he was trying to determine if there was anyone in that room. Gu Nianji saw this and pursed her lips into a smile. She really left. One of our seniors was chasing after her. I saw them heading towards the south gate. Hua Xiaoheng looked away and closed the door before walking into Gu Nianji's room with her. Gu Nianji closed the door and went to the small fridge to get a bottle of mineral water. Hua Xiao, take a seat. I'll be ready soon. She went to the closet to get a change of clothes and turned to go to the bathroom. However, the room suddenly darkened. She turned around to see Hua Xiaoheng already standing in front of the window and closing the curtains. Gu Nianji bit her lower lip, her heart thumping wildly. She understood what Hua Xiaoheng meant. She also wanted to, but she was still a little embarrassed to do it in her own dorm. Hua Xiaoheng closed the curtains but didn't take any further action. He crossed his arms and leaned against the windowsill. The long French curtains sank slightly from his movement. Gu Nianji finally noticed that Hua Xiaoheng was wearing casual clothes today. It was a very stylish white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows and the hem tucked into a high-quality leather belt. It made his legs even more obvious from his waist down. She noticed that her face was already a little hot. She had never been able to resist Hua Xiaoheng's beauty. She quickly looked away and hugged her clothes as she dove into the bathroom. However, Hua Xiaoheng didn't look at her. Instead, he looked around the room. The last time he had been here was when school started. He had helped her change her bed and restocked her with some daily necessities. After a few months, looking at the dormitory again, it was no longer as empty as it was when he first arrived. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. Hua Xiaoheng's gaze finally moved to the bathroom. She was showering in there. Hua Xiaoheng gulped and maintained his posture. His thoughts returned to the reason he had come today. He had originally brought the materials to show Gu Nianji and reassure her. However, he ended up running into her playing tennis with Hijichu. Although they weren't alone and Ma Qiqi was in the middle, and he knew that even if the two of them were alone, nothing would happen, he still gave up on the idea just now. Hua Xiaoheng recalled Gu Nianji's bright smile, her unpredictable actions and her mischievous temper. He sighed heavily in his heart. She was indeed still a child. For the first time he felt that what he had done was truly beastly. Gu Nianji took 15 minutes to finish showering. Her hair was still wet. She used a large towel to dry her hair as she came out of the bathroom. She saw Hua Xiaoheng still leaning against the windowsill. Hua Xiao, sit. Why are you standing? Gu Nianji pointed to a round armchair next to the windowsill. Hua Xiaoheng looked down at her. Her fair skin was so soft and supple. She had just come out of the bathroom, so it was even more hydrated. It was like plump lychee flesh. His lower abdomen heated up, but he held it in. He was already beastly. He couldn't continue beastly. Are you done packing? If you are, then leave. Don't keep Professor He waiting. Hua Xiaoheng's hand itched to smoke, but he couldn't smoke in Gu Nianji's dorm. Gu Nianji nodded. I'll leave after I dry my hair. She sat in front of the vanity under the windowsill and picked up the hairdryer to dry her hair. Hua Xiaoheng stood next to the vanity and looked at her from the corner of his eyes. Gu Nianji had just put down the hairdryer when Hua Xiaoheng shot up behind her. He hugged her from behind and lifted her up. Hot kisses landed on her neck. He sucked hard and had the unique scent of a man. It made her legs go weak. Gu Nianji struggled with all her might. Don't kiss my neck. It'll leave a mark. Okay. Hua Xiaoheng followed her advice. He pulled her shirt open and kissed her shoulder bone. Gu Nianji's legs went weak. Even her feet went weak. But she didn't struggle for long before Hua Xiaoheng let her go. He adjusted her shirt and buttoned it up. Gu Nianji looked down and watched Hua Xiaoheng's slender fingers moving in front of her chest. She wondered why Hua Xiaoheng didn't continue. How long had it been since they'd been intimate? All men needed it. Gu Nianji was now his official girlfriend, so she didn't want Hua Xiaoheng to endure too much. She reached out and slid her hand over Hua Xiaoheng's exposed collarbone. Hua Xiao, you look so good in a white shirt. Hua Xiaoheng's throat tightened. He almost couldn't control himself and wanted to do her on the spot. But he still held back and held Gu Nianji's naughty hand. He smiled. Stop it. Aren't you hungry? As soon as he said that, Gu Nianji's stomach grumbled. It was especially loud in the quiet dorm. The romantic atmosphere was gone. Gu Nianji blamed herself for not being able to withstand hunger. What a troublemaker. She had nothing better to do. Looking at Gu Nianji's resentful expression, Hua Xiaoheng was greatly pleased. He bent down and whispered in Gu Nianji's ear, I'll feed you here first, then come with me to the apartment. I'll feed you here, Hua Xiaoheng's hand wandered down her body from her waist to her abdomen, and finally stopped for a moment. Gu Nianji thought she already understood, but under Hua Xiaoheng's teasing she couldn't help but blush. She gripped Hua Xiaoheng's arm tightly. Her whole body was stiff. It was like she was sitting on his hand. It was the second night, just a reminder, recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 547. Hua Xiaoheng slowly withdrew his hand and hugged her tightly from behind. He whispered in her ear, "Let's go eat first." Gu Nianji wanted to nod, but she realized that even her neck was stiff. It was as if Hua Xiaoheng had cast a spell on her. She couldn't move, so she could only respond with a quiet, Her voice was raised and carried a long trill. It was like plucking the strings of a harp. It was a soft sound, but the lingering sound lingered and wrapped around her. Hua Xiaoheng's heart gradually tightened along with her tone. In the end, it was like a taut string or a fully drawn bow. A simple touch could break the string and bend the bow. Gu Nianji's soft was the last straw that broke the string and activated the bow. He had already pushed Gu Nianji away, but before she could leave his arms, Hua Xiaoheng had already pulled her back into his embrace. He held the back of her head with one hand and kissed her tightly, while his other hand quickly unbuttoned her clothes in front of her chest. The buttons he had just buttoned were now unbuttoned by him. Gu Nianji's lips were in his mouth and she could feel his large hands moving. She murmured, "You're so annoying. You're the one who should be wearing and taking them off." Hua Xiaoheng ignored her sweet complaints and instantly unbuttoned her clothes. Gu Nianji's toes tensed up. She swayed and couldn't stand. She was almost hanging onto Hua Xiaoheng. "Dorm. In the dorm. Be gentle." Gu Nianji stuttered and used her remaining rationality to remind Hua Xiaoheng. No one knew how good the soundproofing was in the dorm. Although Ma Qiqi wasn't in the dorm, who knew if there was anyone in the dorm next door? She didn't want her classmates to eavesdrop on her. Hua Xiaoheng's hand paused. His rationality told him to stop. He had strong self-control and could control his body under any circumstances. Just as he was about to let go of her, he heard Gu Nianji say, "Professor, he is waiting for us to eat. Don't let him wait too long." Hua Xiaoheng's large hands immediately hugged Gu Nianji tightly again and walked directly to the bed. What are you doing? Don't." Gu Nianji didn't have time to speak before Hua Xiaoheng covered her mouth and used his lips to seal everything she wanted to say. The tip of his tongue went in and found her little tongue. He chased and entangled it so she couldn't speak. Gu Nianji was dizzy from his kisses and soon realized that she had been stripped naked like a little lamb. She lay paralyzed on the thin carpet of purple roses. She was lying on the purple carpet. Even a peeled lychee wasn't as tender or as sweet. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes darkened as he stared at her with his dark, jade-like eyes. His gaze swept over her from head to toe, and just looking at her made her entire body tremble. Gu Nianji was sprawled on the bed like a lamb waiting to be slaughtered. However, a lamb would not turn around and smile at Hua Xiaoheng. Hua Xiaoheng's eyes darkened. He hugged her from behind and kissed her neck and back. He said in a low voice, "You've grown up. Tell me, who did you learn from?" "I didn't learn from anyone." Gu Nianji raised her head and panted lightly. Her voice was intermittent. "You didn't learn from anyone? Who would believe you?" Hua Xiaoheng's breathing became heavier. Gu Nianji was so shy that even the tips of her toes had turned red. Her fair skin was covered with a faint blush. It was the faint and elegant blush of a lotus flower blooming in spring. Although it wasn't dazzling, it was enough to attract Hua Xiaoheng's attention. He had never thought about what the woman he liked was like. Even after he got together with Gu Nianji, he didn't think about it. But at this moment he knew what the woman he liked was like. Every detail he liked was on Gu Nianji. Her appearance was a miracle for the military. It was also a miracle for him. Hua Xiaoheng felt a warm feeling in his heart. The numbness in his heart was gradually magnified and spread to his entire body. Gu Nianji suddenly came to her senses and said, "Condom? You didn't use a condom?" He hugged her shoulders and kissed her a few times before saying, "Do you have one here?" "No." Gu Nianji was embarrassed. "They're all in the apartment." "Then I don't need one." "I can't. What if I get pregnant?" Gu Nianji stammered. Come out first." Hua Xiaoheng didn't expect this kind of treatment. He took a deep breath and whispered in her ear, "It's okay. I'll give birth if I get pregnant." "No?" Gu Nianji shook her head desperately. "I'm only 18. I don't want to have a child." She was still a child herself. "Okay," Hua Xiaoheng replied. "Got it?" In the end, Gunyanji only felt a chill on her back and suddenly understood what had happened. Although she wouldn't get pregnant this way, but she turned around to look at Hua Xiaoheng with a pout on her face. She wanted to cry but had no tears. Hua Xiaoheng said, "Don't move. I'll get a towel." She could only lie motionlessly on the bed and wait for Hua Xiaoheng to get a towel. He wrapped her up and carried her to the bathroom. He turned on the shower and the two of them took another shower to finally wash off the stickiness on their bodies. Coming out of the bathroom, Gunyanji glared at Hua Xiaoheng and said, "I want to buy some condoms to put in the dorm." "No need." Hua Xiaoheng objected nonchalantly. "Today was an accident. It won't happen again." Hua Xiaoheng would never allow such a thing to happen in school. "An accident?" Gunyanji held the hairdryer in her hand and dried her hair as she looked back at Hua Xiaoheng. "I don't believe it." Gunyanji believed that there was no person or thing that could make Hua Xiaoheng lose control. Everything he did was planned. "I can't help it if you don't believe me." Hua Xiaoheng fastened his belt in front of the mirror and tucked the hem of his white shirt into the belt. The white shirt was slightly wrinkled, but it wasn't obvious. However, his hair was still a bit wet. Gunyanji blew her long hair until it was half dry and stood up to ask Hua Xiaoheng, "Hua Xiao, let me dry your hair for you?" Hua Xiaoheng wiped it with a towel and shook his head. "No need. It'll dry quickly." Gunyanji thought that the weather was getting hot and her hair would dry quickly, so she didn't rush him. As she was drying her hair, her phone rang. Hua Xiaoheng picked up the phone from her desk and saw that it was He Jichu calling. His fingers moved and unlocked the call. "Professor He?" He Jichu's expression darkened when he heard Hua Xiaoheng's voice. He said coldly, "Where's Nianji? She's not coming for dinner either?" Ma Chichi had texted earlier to say she wouldn't be coming. He Jichu had replied, "Okay, I'll treat you next time." He didn't expect Gunyanji to not show up even after waiting for half an hour at the Hubei restaurant. Nianji just showered and is drying her hair. "She'll be right there after," Hua Xiaoheng said calmly. He crossed his arms and leaned against the windowsill to open the curtains. Ijichu's heart felt stifled. He closed his eyes to suppress his anger and said coldly, "Hurry up, I've already ordered." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the dining table in the private room. Gunyanji finished drying her hair and changed her clothes before asking Hua Xiaoheng, "Who was on the phone just now?" "Professor He's already at the restaurant." "Let's go," Hua Xiaoheng said nonchalantly. Gunyanji casually picked up her Hermes bucket bag and followed Hua Xiaoheng out. They came down from the dorm and got into Hua Xiaoheng's car. They quickly drove to the Hubei restaurant outside the south gate and found the private room He Jichu had reserved. They walked in one after the other. Under the bright chandelier in the private room, Gunyanji's eyes were clear and her body was as soft as a willow. It was obvious she had just been showered. He Jichu's eyes were bloodshot. He walked up and punched Hua Xiaoheng in the face. "You animal." Hua Xiaoheng's movements were surprisingly fast. He tilted his head in the direction of He Jichu's punch so he didn't get hit in the face. However, He Jichu's movements were also unusually fast. Hua Xiaoheng dodged the punch and followed it up with his left fist, smashing hard into Hua Xiaoheng's back. Hua Xiaoheng hadn't expected He Jichu to be so strong despite his gentlemanly and elegant appearance. His punches were clearly methodical, so it was obvious that he had been trained. He dodged the punch on his face but he couldn't dodge the punch on his back. Boom. The sound was so loud that it echoed in the private room. Gunyanji was dumbfounded. Before she could react, the two mature and calm men in front of outsiders had already exchanged several blows. "Stop, stop, stop." Gunyanji snapped out of her daze and threw herself in front of Hua Xiaoheng to shield him. Ijichu sneered at Hua Xiaoheng. "Are you still a man when you let a woman shield you?" Hua Xiaoheng wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. He said calmly, "It's my fault. You hit me, I admit it." He was indeed an animal. Ijichu was right to scold and hit him, so Hua Xiaoheng didn't fight back. He only dodged to avoid being hit in the face. "She's only 18. How dare you? How dare you?" Ijichu thought that with Hua Xiaoheng's personality and status, even if he confirmed his relationship with Gunyanji, he wouldn't have made any progress with her so early. But when he saw their expressions today and Hua Xiaoheng deliberately didn't blow dry his hair, how could he not understand? Gunyanji blushed. Ijichu's words made her very embarrassed. She didn't expect Ijichu to see through it so easily. She had already showered. She had even dried her hair and made sure she didn't smell like that before coming out. Hua Xiaoheng stepped forward and shielded Gunyanji behind him. He said calmly to Ijichu, "It's my fault. I will take responsibility." Gu Nianji looked up from behind him and stared at Hua Xiaoheng's back. It was as if she wanted to see a hole in his back and see what he was thinking. Did he really just want to take responsibility? Why did she want him to take responsibility? She did it willingly and he didn't force her. Gu Nianji felt a little stifled. She looked down and tugged at the corner of Hua Xiaoheng's shirt. Hua Xiao, Professor He, let's eat. I'm hungry. This was the first update with 3,000 words. A reminder to everyone about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an extra update at 7 p.m. I repeatedly edited and deleted 1,000 words before posting it. Chapter 548. Hijichu snorted again before returning to his seat. His expression was frosty and he didn't look hungry at all. Gu Nianji didn't dare look up at Hijichu. She sat beside Hua Xiaoheng and quietly took the bowl and chopsticks to look at the dishes on the table. The dishes Hijichu ordered were all Gu Nianji's favorite home-cooked dishes: lotus root and spare rib soup, pearl dumplings, stir-fried eggs with chili peppers, stir-fried shredded pork with chili peppers, and shredded potatoes with vinegar sauce. There were light green, bright yellow, refreshing white, and lotus root rib soup. Gu Nianji's gaze fell on the lotus root and spare rib soup. It was a habit that Hua Xiaoheng had taught her to drink soup before eating. Hijichu also had this habit. However, he didn't have any appetite at the moment and only looked at Gu Nianji quietly. Hua Xiaoheng picked up the spoon and scooped a spoonful of lotus root and spare rib soup for Gu Nianji. Gu Nianji sipped the soup as she looked at Hijichu and then Hua Xiaoheng. She asked hesitantly, "Professor He, aren't you going to eat?" Hua Xiaoheng heard Gu Nianji say this and scooped a bowl of rice for himself. He ate it with fried eggs with chili and shredded pork with chili. Hijichu ordered a bottle of red wine and poured a glass for himself. Hua Xiaoheng put down the bowl and also poured a glass of red wine. He raised his glass to Hijichu. "I haven't properly thanked Professor He for what happened in Barbados. Unfortunately, I'm going abroad soon and don't have time to treat you. When I come back, Nianji and I will treat Professor He to a meal. Please, Professor He, you must come." Gu Nianji put down the spoon and looked at Hijichu. She nodded. "Professor He, you must come." Hijichu looked down at the wine glass in his hand. He raised it and swirled it before taking a sip. He didn't even look up. "I'll see." He thought about it and looked at Gu Nianji. "Nianji, you're my teaching assistant. Did you prepare my calendar for the next month? You know better than me if I have time." As his teaching assistant, Gu Nianji indeed had to help Hijichu plan his daily work calendar. What they were going to do, who they were going to meet, what seats they were going to talk about, and what classes they were going to attend had to be made clear. They had to plan their schedule for at least 2 months. Gu Nianji had a good memory, so she immediately thought about it and said, "Professor He, you have more free time this month. Next month will be a little more busy, so I'll look at Professor He's calendar to determine the time for the treat." "Yes." Hijichu agreed and didn't say anything else. He quietly drank the red wine by himself, and soon the bottle was empty. Gu Nianji was usually full after finishing the soup, but today was special. She had used up too much energy, so she ate 2 more bowls of rice after finishing the soup. Hijichu, Gu Nianji quietly looked up and met Hijichu's and Hua Xiaoheng's sharp eyes. Why are you guys looking at me like that?" Gu Nianji put down her bowl and chopsticks. "Can't you let me eat properly?" They were like 2 cheetahs glaring at her. Their eyes were so aggressive that Gu Nianji felt like she couldn't handle it. After finally finishing the meal, there wasn't much left on the table, so there was no need to take it away. In the end, Hijichu still didn't eat anything. Hua Xiaoheng got up to pay the bill at the front desk, but was told that Hijichu had already paid. He didn't say anything and turned back to the private room to see Gu Nianji talking to Hijichu. Hijichu drank on an empty stomach, so he was already tipsy. However, he didn't ramble or do anything unimaginable like most drunken people. He was drunk, so only his eyes were especially bright. His shimmering, sultry eyes were even more lethal. If he went out to flirt with girls now, he could flirt with whoever he wanted, except for Gu Nianji. Seeing him like this, Gu Nianji worriedly said to Hua Xiaoheng, "Hua Xiao, should we take Professor He back? He can't drive like this." "Yes." Hua Xiaoheng agreed without hesitation. He and Gu Nianji stood on either side of Hijichu as they walked out of the restaurant. Hijichu could still control himself in the beginning, but as soon as he walked out of the Hubei restaurant, he let himself go. He stood alone on the steps and refused to go down. He looked at Gu Nianji and only smiled without saying anything. Gu Nianji was so anxious that she was sweating profusely. She finally stuffed him into Hua Xiaoheng's car and drove back to the B University professor's building. Hijichu's suite was on the 28th floor. The three of them took the elevator to the 28th floor and finally arrived at Hijichu's dorm room. Professor He opened the door. Gu Nianji pointed at the keyhole. There were two ways to open the door to the suite, with a combination key or fingerprint. Gu Nianji thought that Hijichu must have the key on him, but after asking a few times, Hijichu only looked at her and smiled without saying anything. He wouldn't tell her how to open the door. Gu Nianji finally couldn't take it anymore and pulled Hijichu's hand to scan the fingerprint lock. With a click, the door was opened by the two of them. Hua Xiaoheng and Gu Nianji helped Hijichu into the room and laid him on the sofa in the living room. Gu Nianji even brought a basin of warm water for Hijichu to wipe himself. Okay Nianji, that's enough. Let's go. Hua Xiaoheng saw that it was about time and said to take Gu Nianji away. Gu Nianji put the towel on the edge of the basin and reminded him, Professor He, you need to eat something solid when you're hungry. A glass of red wine isn't enough. Hua Xiaoheng had already left, so Gu Nianji followed. As soon as she got into Hua Xiaoheng's car, she kept talking to him. Hua Xiao, will Professor He be okay? Hua Xiao, do you think Professor He has a part-time worker? Hua Xiao, is it bad for Professor He's liver if he drinks on an empty stomach? Hua Xiaoheng glanced at her and said dryly, since you're so worried, I'll take you back to take care of Professor He? Gu Nianji smiled sheepishly and let go of Hua Xiaoheng's hand. I was just saying that. Will Hua Xiao be angry? She had said and done many stupid things in the past, but Hua Xiao had never cared. Of course he had never said anything about her in public. Now, his tone was actually filled with mockery. Gu Nianji wasn't used to Hua Xiao being like this. The car turned onto the tree-lined path at the south gate and drove towards the south gate. Gu Nianji blinked. Where are we going? To the apartment. Hua Xiaoheng stepped on the accelerator and gradually increased the speed. As soon as they drove out of the south gate of B University, the premium sports car roared and sped forward. Unfortunately, they were in the fourth ring road of the imperial capital. Even though it was a weekend, there were still traffic jams. Gu Nianji leaned her head against the window and looked at the long line of cars outside. She mumbled, how much longer? Hua Xiaoheng looked at the map and saw that there was a car accident up ahead. That was why there was such a long line. This road was blocked, so they had to find another way. Fortunately, they had the most timely map on their phone, so they found a small path and drove over. The small path was also very close to Gu Nianji's high-rise duplex suite. They got out of the car and were in a better mood. They walked into the elevator hand in hand and watched as the number on the elevator rose to Gu Nianji's floor. The elevator dinged and the door opened. Gu Nianji's older sister, Gu Yanran, stood at the door. This was the second night, a reminder, recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 549. When Gu Nianji saw Gu Yanran, she couldn't help but look at the floor of the elevator. That's right, it was the 18th floor. The elevators here had one unit per floor. How could there be someone else on this floor? Gu Yanran saw Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng in the elevator and looked relieved. She quickly said, Mr. Hua, is this apartment yours? That's great, I finally waited for someone to come. This property management is killing me. Gu Nianji was speechless. This apartment was clearly hers. Why did Gu Yanran assume it was Hua Xiaoheng's? Fine, Hua Xiaoheng had indeed paid for it, but it was now under her name. With that thought, Gu Nianji didn't dare to correct Gu Yanran. She walked out of the elevator and asked in surprise, Sis, why are you here? How did you get up? Hua Xiaoheng walked out from behind her. Seeing that Gu Nianji didn't correct Gu Yanran, he glanced at her but didn't say anything. Gu Yanran's gaze returned to Gu Nianji. She raised her hand to wipe her fringe and said helplessly, How else could I get up? Of course I took the elevator up. As she spoke, she showed her residence card to Gu Nianji and Hua Xiaoheng. Look, this is my residence card. I clearly bought an apartment on the 19th floor, but this damn card took me to the 18th floor. No matter how I pressed it, it only went up to here. I was just about to go down and ask the property management. Sis, you bought a house here too? Gu Nianji was even more surprised. Her eyebrows twitched imperceptibly. Why did you want to buy a house here? Oh, I have a villa in the suburbs. I bought it last year. Now that Dad is in the imperial capital and you found a place, I want to buy a house near you in the city. Our family of 3 can get together often. Gu Yanran said with a smile. I didn't expect to be neighbors with Mr. Hua. Hua Xiaoheng finally smiled. This isn't my house. He turned to look at Gu Nianji. A hint of tenderness flashed in his deep, dark eyes. It's Nianji's. You sisters are really fated. It was Gu Yanran's turn to be shocked. She looked at Gu Nianji, then at Hua Xiaoheng before asking, "This house really belongs to Nianji?" "Yes, it is indeed hers." Hua Xiaoheng put an arm around Gu Nianji's shoulders and said politely to Gu Yanran, "Nianji is still young. Miss Gu is her older sister, so please bear with her in the future. We won't disturb Miss Gu's discussion with the property management." He led Gu Nianji to the door. Gu Yanran turned around to look at them and waved at Gu Nianji with a smile. "Nianji, I'm leaving now. We're neighbors now. I'll visit you often in the future." With that, she walked to the elevator and went down. Hua Xiaoheng took out his key card and swiped the door. Gu Nianji muttered, "What kind of lousy property is this? Was there still any privacy? Deduct money. You must deduct the money." The two of them entered the house. Hua Xiaoheng looked around and pulled up the surveillance footage. He found that Gu Yanran was indeed standing by the elevator. She didn't try to open the door to their room. Of course no one came in. Everything was normal on the surveillance footage. Gu Nianji breathed a sigh of relief and shook her head. "But this is too much of a coincidence. Why did she buy it on top of me?" She looked up at the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. It felt weird to think that Gu Yanran would be walking around on top of her from now on. Hua Xiaoheng walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge to find a can of beer. He opened it and downed it in one gulp. Looking up at the ceiling, he mused, "I'll be going abroad in 2 days. Don't stay here during this time. Go to the base when you have time." Although Gu Nianji felt uncomfortable, she didn't think about not coming. She had already decorated the house bit by bit. It was her second home. How could she not come here just like that? Moreover, she and Gu Yanran had the same father. Their relationship had always been intertwined. When father wakes up in the future, he'll probably live upstairs. It'll be more convenient to take care of him together. Gu Nianji walked over and took out a bottle of coconut juice from the fridge. She opened it and took a sip. The cold and sweet juice flowed down her esophagus and made her feel much better. Hua Xiaoheng thought of Gu Xiangwen and nodded thoughtfully. "Your father probably won't recover for a while. Go visit him at Qinlai's place more often and talk to him. Maybe he'll get better faster." "Really? How's he doing?" Gu Nianji put the unfinished coconut juice back into the fridge and stared at the beer in Hua Xiaoheng's hand. "Hua Xiao, you like this brand of beer? Is it good?" Hua Xiaoheng raised his hand and threw the can into the trash. "It's okay, but you can't drink it. Remember, you can't drink until you're 22. You can buy alcohol at the bar at 18. Gu Nianji was unhappy. "Why do I have to wait until I'm 22? You've really grown up." Hua Xiaoheng turned around and wrapped his arms around Gu Nianji's waist. "You even dare to talk back to me now?" No. Only Hua Xiaoheng talks back to me. I don't dare talk back to Hua Xiaoheng." Gu Nianji leaned into his embrace and said lazily. Hua Xiaoheng's embrace was warm and safe. It was Gu Nianji's favorite place. Hua Xiaoheng curled his lips and lowered his head to whisper in Gu Nianji's ear. "Indeed, you only get talked back by me. Do you want to talk back a few more times?" Gu Nianji was speechless. She quickly understood what Hua Xiaoheng meant. She suddenly looked up, her cheeks flushed and her eyes filled with lust. She pushed Hua Xiaoheng and gritted her teeth. "I didn't expect you to be like this, Hua Xiaoheng. There are a lot of things you can't imagine. Come, let me show you a few things you can't imagine." Hua Xiaoheng exerted strength in his arms and lifted Gu Nianji by the waist to walk to the bedroom. It was another night of tumultuous red waves. The rain was light and the wind was strong, crushing the crabapple. When Gu Nianji woke up the next day, she found herself nestled in Hua Xiaoheng's arms with her head on his shoulder. One of Hua Xiaoheng's long legs was pressed against her back and encircled her tightly. No wonder she felt so heavy last night that she couldn't breathe. She quietly looked up and saw Hua Xiaoheng quietly looking at her. His eyes were as black as ink and the brilliance was restrained. They were like fine black pearls, and with a slight movement of his eyes, there was a dazzling brilliance flowing out. Gu Nianji hugged his head as if she was bewitched. She leaned up and kissed his eyes devoutly. Hua Xiaoheng had already closed his eyes the moment she leaned in and let her kiss his eyelids. Gu Nianji's kisses were delicate and hot, like starlight reflected in a lake. When the breeze blew, it set off ripples of starlight. His heart rippled with such kisses. When she finished kissing him, he hugged her gently, his chin sliding back and forth on the side of her smooth face. After a night of rest, the green stubble that had just sprouted on his chin made Gu Nianji giggle. She kept hiding and squirming under the blankets. Male hormones were the most vigorous when they woke up in the morning, and Hua Xiaoheng was no exception. Once a man who had been abstinent for many years started to have sex, and the girl he liked was next to him. What was the point of holding back? So Gu Nianji found that she was being pinned down again as she tried to hide. This time, Hua Xiaoheng took an especially long time. In the end, Gu Nianji almost cried and begged him to let her go. After that, Hua Xiaoheng went to the bathroom to take a shower, then went to the kitchen to make breakfast. Gu Nianji soaked in the bathroom for a long time before coming out holding her waist. This time was really too much, but she remembered that Hua Xiaoheng was about to go abroad for a mission. They wouldn't have any contact during this period, and she didn't know when he would come back. Gu Nianji felt relieved. As the family of a soldier, she was mentally prepared to be separated from time to time. So could Hua Xiaoheng's enthusiasm from yesterday to today be because he also couldn't bear to leave her? Gu Nianji thought happily as she applied skincare products on her face. In the mirror, her lips were red, her teeth were white, and her eyes were watery. She really didn't look like she was overindulging. Except for her sore back, Hua Xiaoheng walked in and saw Gu Nianji sitting in front of the vanity, rubbing her back from time to time. His eyes flashed and he walked over to massage her waist. "What's wrong? Your back isn't feeling well?" "It's all because of you." Gu Nianji turned around and glared at Hua Xiaoheng. "You almost broke my back." Gu Nianji's waist was very thin, and Hua Xiaoheng's hand had measured it several times. It really wasn't big enough to hold. It was like a willow branch, but it was also very tough. It was almost like her personality. Hua Xiaoheng kissed the center of her hair. "I'll give you a massage." After a few massages, Gu Nianji felt itchy and numb. She quickly pushed him away with a smile. "I don't dare ask the Major General to be my masseuse. I don't have much luck. I can't afford it." "Who said that? You're a very lucky person." Hua Xiaoheng picked her up and sat on the soft stool in front of Gu Nianji's vanity. He let Gu Nianji sit on his lap. "Where do you want to go today? I'll accompany you." "Really?" Gu Nianji turned around in surprise. "The whole day?" Hua Xiaoheng looked at his watch. "There's always 12 hours. His time was really calculated by the hour and the minute. Gu Nianji was already very satisfied. She hugged and kissed him. "Can you study with me?" Hua Xiaoheng was speechless. "You don't want to?" Gu Nianji blinked. Her long eyelashes were like 2 rows of little fans. They were so close that Hua Xiaoheng could almost feel the 2 rows of fans fluttering in front of his face. They were as light as butterfly wings. "You only want me to study with you?" Hua Xiaoheng asked again. "It's rare for me to have so much free time." "Yeah." Gu Nianji nodded. Her expression was slightly aggrieved. "I used to see them study in pairs at school. They even reserved seats for the girls. I was so envious. I wanted a boyfriend to do that with me. But no one ever studied with me." "Didn't Mei Xiaowen study with you before?" Hua Xiaoheng pointed out the loophole in Gu Nianji's words without batting an eyelid. Gu Nianji's embarrassment turned to anger. She reached out to cover his dark eyes that seemed to see through everything. She gritted her teeth. "I said no. Mei Xiaowen doesn't count. That's just a normal classmate." This was the first chapter with 3,000 words. Let me remind everyone about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. There will be an extra chapter at 7 p.m. Alright, why hasn't everyone voted for me recently? How sad. It's fine if you don't have monthly votes, but why don't you vote for free recommendation votes every day? Chapter 550. Gu Nianji had only wanted to make it sound pitiful to arouse Hua Xiaoheng's sympathy so he could accompany her to school for self-study. Actually, it wasn't that she didn't have anyone to study with, but the person who did was not Hua Xiaoheng. She had said so much and acted so aggrieved because she wanted Hua Xiaoheng to study with her once and fulfill one of her wishes. Hua Xiaoheng pulled her hand down with a smile and kissed it. "Sure, we'll study by ourselves then." Gu Nianji was overjoyed. She hugged Hua Xiaoheng's neck and kissed him. "Hua Xiao is the best." After breakfast, they took Hua Xiaoheng's car back to school. Not long after they left, Gu Nianji received a call from Gu Yanran. "Nianji, where are you? I personally cooked some dishes that you liked to eat when you were young. Shall I come down to pick you up to eat?" Gu Nianji smiled and said, "Oh, what a coincidence. I'm already back at school." "This early?" Gu Yanran looked at her watch. It was only 10 in the morning. At 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, most people would be sleeping in, right? Could it be that Hua Xiaoheng hadn't spent the night at Gu Nianji's apartment? Gu Yanran frowned and asked hesitantly, "Nianji, did Hua Xiao leave yesterday?" Gu Nianji grunted. She didn't want to talk about such a private topic with Gu Yanran. Although she already knew that Gu Yanran was her older sister, her memory had not recovered yet. She did not have the kind of familial love that had been fostered since they were young. She was only slightly closer to Gu Yanran than a normal friend. Her relationship with Ma Chichi was not even as good as hers. Sis, you eat by yourself. I'm about to reach school. I'm on my way. She pretended to hang up the phone. Are you driving yourself? She did not expect Gu Yanran to have no intention of hanging up and actually start a conversation with her. Gu Nianji could only say, no, I took a taxi. She didn't want to say that Hua Xiaoheng was driving. That way, Gu Yanran would know that Hua Xiaoheng had spent the night at her apartment. She didn't say it just now, so now she was even more embarrassed to say it and slap herself in the face. Rent? Gu Yanran's frown deepened. Nianji, I'll buy you a car. Do you want a Lexus or a Beetle? It was most suitable for young ladies to drive. You are the daughter of the Gu family, how can you always take a taxi? Gu Nianji felt a little guilty. Gu Yanran did seem to treat her well, but she didn't need him to buy her a car. When Gu Nianji spoke again, her tone was much gentler. It's okay, sis. I actually have a car, but it's not convenient to drive it to school. There's no suitable parking space, so I'm used to taking a taxi. Is that so? It's okay, I'll hire a driver for you. Gu Yanran was probably used to being a leader, so she immediately made the decision for Gu Nianji. I'll send you the link to buy a car. You can pick one and I'll arrange a driver for you. I'll be more assured if there's a driver to pick you up on weekends. Gu Nianji's heart warmed slightly, but she still shook her head and refused. Sis, I really don't need it. Hua Xiao also has a driver who can pick me up. Nianji, I was about to talk to you about this. Gu Yanran's tone became serious. Nianji, tell me honestly. What's your relationship with Hua Xiao? It's a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. Gu Nianji sounded a little guilty. Hua Xiaoheng glanced at her and reached out to stroke her head. He didn't say anything. Are you guys married? Gu Yanran asked again. She stood in front of the French windows in the apartment and looked at the blue sky and white clouds outside. Her thoughts flew to faraway Barbados, and she recalled the days she spent with Gu Nianji as a child. Her expression became even more solemn. Of course not. Gu Nianji switched to another hand to answer the phone. She felt a little stressed. But, there's no but. Gu Yanran raised her head. Since you're not married to him and are only boyfriend and girlfriend, you can't rely on him too much financially. Girls from the Gu family aren't gold diggers. They don't need to rely on men. Sis, what are you talking about? Gu Nianji was speechless. She quickly explained, of course I'm not trying to rely on Hua Xiao. That's good. Gu Yanran's tone softened. She said gently, if that's not the case, then where did you get the money to buy a house? The apartment you're living in now isn't something a student like you can afford. Gu Yanran knew that Gu Nianji had been an orphan for the past 6 or 7 years, and Hua Xiaoheng was her guardian. But now she had a house and a car and the apartment was in a nice area. It wasn't something a middle-class person could afford. Where did she get the money? It was Hua Xiaoheng who bought it for her. You and Hua Xiao are only boyfriend and girlfriend, not husband and wife. How can you accept such an expensive gift? Gu Yanran's tone was a little high. Give me your bank account number. I'll transfer the money to you and you can return the money to Hua Xiao. Although the Gu family isn't as powerful and influential as the Huas, we still have the money to buy a house. We don't need to live in a man's house before we're married. Gu Nianji's emotions were extremely complicated. She didn't know how to respond. She had indeed thought about returning the money to Hua Xiaoheng in the future, especially the money for the house. That was why she wanted to be He Zhichu's teaching assistant. She even planned to intern at He Zhichu's law firm in her second year of graduate school. That way she would be able to earn more money. Gu Yanran's words hit the nail on the head. But Hua Xiaoheng definitely wouldn't take her money. Gu Nianji began to stammer over the phone. Sis, let's talk about this later. The house isn't urgent. I know Hua Xiao doesn't care about this bit of money, but the Gu family doesn't care either. You have to show your attitude. A girl can't throw herself at a man, but she also can't be too dependent on a man. Gu Yanran obviously approved of going Dutch between men and women. Her tone became even more serious. More importantly, Nianji, you're no longer an orphan. You have the Gu family, me and father to support you. Don't use a man's money anymore. The Gu family can't afford to lose face. Gu Nianji's face became redder and redder as she listened. She was even a little ashamed. Because she had been using Hua Xiaoheng's money all this time. Although Hua Xiaoheng didn't care and was almost meticulous with her, fulfilling all her requests and even exceeding all of her expectations, Gu Yanran's words hit the nail on the head. Gu Yanran's words struck a sore spot in her heart. Wasn't she taking it for granted? Holding the phone, the sharp-tongued Gu Nianji couldn't say a word for the first time. She could only listen to Gu Yanran scold her over the phone. Although it wasn't pleasant to hear, she felt it made sense. They weren't married yet, so shouldn't she be using so much of Hua Xiaoheng's money? Glancing at her Hermes bucket bag, she felt her knees hurt even more. Gu Yanran spoke for a long time and saw that Gu Nianji didn't say anything. She knew that Gu Nianji must have listened to her, so she continued, "Send me your bank account number. I'll arrange to transfer the money to you. How much did you spend on that apartment?" Gu Nianji answered honestly, "I don't know. Hua Xiao bought it and put it under my name." Gu Yanran didn't speak for a long time. After a while she finally said, "Okay, I understand. I'll transfer your allowance to your bank account every month. Remember not to use a man's money anymore. If you want to marry him, you have to be more reserved. If you treat yourself like a canary, no one will respect you, let alone marry you." Gu Nianji recalled Hua Xiaoheng saying, "The marriage application has already been submitted." She felt proud again. Her Hua Xiaoheng was different from those coquettish bastards out there. And he did want to marry her. He wouldn't disrespect her. However, Gu Nianji was still too young. Her yearning for love hadn't transitioned to a normal married relationship. It hadn't even been half a year since she officially established her relationship with Hua Xiaoheng. She didn't even think about using marriage to prove anything. In today's society there were countless people who got married and then divorced. Wasn't it good for two people to love each other? Marriage? Let's talk about it after she graduated. Before that, she wanted to enjoy the feeling of being in love. She would only be in love once in her life, so she cherished it very much. It was the second night. Reminder: recommendation votes and monthly votes. Chapter 551. Gu Nianji held the phone and leaned her head against the window. The smile on her face was bright and moving. She glanced at Hua Xiaoheng, who was driving, and said to Gu Yanran, "Sis, Hua Xiao isn't that kind of person. He already said that he wants to marry me." Gu Yanran laughed. "Nianji, just listen to what men say. He said he's married, but he's not married yet, right?" Gu Nianji was speechless. She looked at Hua Xiaoheng and wanted to say that he had already applied for marriage, but she remembered that even Yin Shixiang and Zhao Liangzi didn't know about it. She didn't say it and only emphasized, "Hua Xiao is serious about me. But thank you, sis. I'll remember what you said." Although Gu Yanran's words weren't pleasant, Gu Nianji knew it was for her own good. Only family members would say such unpleasant things, right? Of course, she had long realized this problem and had secretly prepared to be independent. She still remembered everything Hua Xiaoheng had done for her. She didn't think it was pity or charity. Gu Yanran saw that Gu Nianji was obedient and nodded slightly. "Okay, then go to school." She paused and asked, "Are you coming back next weekend? Do you want me to pick you up?" She thought of her father, Gu Xiangwen, and immediately said to Gu Nianji, "Oh right, I want to visit father in 2 days. Do you want to come?" Gu Nianji looked at Hua Xiaoheng and nodded when he didn't object. "Okay sis. Let me know when you're going to visit father and we'll go together." Their father, Gu Xiangwen, was at Chen Lai's place. Without Gu Nianji, Gu Yanran probably wouldn't be able to see him. Gu Nianji thought that Gu Xiangwen was also Gu Yanran's father. They were bringing him to the Huaxia Empire, so how could they stop father and daughter from seeing each other? Only then was Gu Yanran satisfied. She comforted her before hanging up. Holding the phone, she stood in front of the French windows for a while. Her gaze passed through the transparent French windows and landed on the distant highway. Cars passed by on the highway and she squinted to see which car was Gu Nianji's. Not long after, her phone rang again. Looking down, she saw it was an unknown number. Confused, she picked it up and said, "Hello?" No one spoke on the other side, but they could hear a man's breathing getting heavier. Gu Yanran's heart trembled. As expected, it was someone she was familiar with. That person said, "Yanran, how long are you going to hide from me? Do you think that if you end everything in Barbados, I won't be able to find you?" It was actually Yixian. Gu Yanran was shocked. Holding her phone, she leaned against the chaise longue next to the French windows and asked slowly, "Yixian? How did you get my number?" This was the number she had applied for after coming to the Huaxia Empire. "What's so difficult about that? Not only do I know your phone number, but I also know where you are right now." Yixian let out a low chuckle. "My lady, you are on the 19th floor, aren't you?" "Yes, look down. I'm standing under your apartment. What do you think? Let me up?" Gu Yanran jumped up from the chaise longue and walked to the window to look down. Unfortunately, on the 19th floor, Everything on the ground was like an ant. It was impossible to see clearly without binoculars. Gu Yanran thought about it and actually went inside to get a pair of binoculars. She walked to the balcony to look down. Under the apartment building, a tall man wearing sunglasses and casual clothes waved in her direction. It really was Yi Xian. Gu Yanran was so shocked she couldn't control herself. Not only did Yi Xian find her phone number, but he also knew about the new apartment she had just bought. It was unbelievable. Gu Yanran had a new interest in him. She looked from the balcony for a while and finally nodded. Go into the elevator. I'll let you up. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at Gu Yanran's apartment. As soon as he opened the door, he hugged Gu Yanran and pressed her against the wall to kiss her fiercely. Gu Yanran struggled for a while, but in the end, her whole body went limp from his kisses. She didn't even know how the two of them tangled and finally rolled onto the bed. She only knew that when it was finally over, she almost fainted. Yi Xian got up and took his clothes to the bathroom to shower. Gu Yanran sat on the bed in her nightgown and thought about it for a while before following him to the bathroom door. The door wasn't closed. Gu Yanran pushed it open and the sound of the shower stopped. What's wrong? Yi Xian opened the shower curtain and revealed his tan body. His powerful 8-pack abs were exposed in front of Gu Yanran without a care in the world. Gu Yanran looked at him thoughtfully and suddenly asked, "How did you find me?" She had clearly cut off all contact with him. Even the people around her didn't know her private phone number. How did Yi Xian know? You really want to know? Yi Xian walked out with a towel wrapped around his waist. He reached out to lift her chin, his eyes wild and aggressive. Kiss me and I'll tell you. Gu Yanran didn't hesitate to tiptoe and kiss him. Yi Xian kissed her back with satisfaction and whispered in her ear, "Yanran, you never asked me what my major was in boarding school in the United States, right?" Gu Yanran was speechless. She really wasn't sure. Gu Yanran wasn't interested in knowing more about an orphan sponsored by their family. I have a code name online. It's called Max. Yi Xian straightened his back, his expression somewhat sinister. Go check the dark web, Max, and you'll know who I am. Gu Yanran's heart skipped a beat. Dark web? Someone who knew about the dark web and had a certain reputation. There wasn't just any ordinary person. Gu Yanran's interest in him increased. You have this ability? Why didn't you tell me before? Yi Xian looked at her deeply. You didn't need it before, but you do now. That's why I came to you. Gu Yanran couldn't be bothered with him anymore. She took her phone and returned to the bedroom to search for Dark Web Max. The results shocked her so much that her jaw almost dropped. It turned out that Max was a rising hacker on the dark web. He was independent and didn't have any connections with any forces, but he always participated in whatever happened. He was like the last weight on the scale. As long as he fell, that side would win. Gu Yanran was stunned. Holding the phone to her chest, she thought to herself that this person's computer skills were truly unfathomable. No wonder he could easily find her new phone number and where she lived. She didn't have such a capable person around her. Now that she was in the Wuxia Empire and was unfamiliar with the place and people, Yi Xian could really help her a lot with this kind of technology. Yi Xian put on his clothes and walked over. Gu Yanran had already returned to normal. She looked at him as if she had never seen him before and pointed to the sofa beside her bed. Sit. Yi Xian sat down and rested his elbows on the sofa's armrest. He clasped his hands and crossed his legs. Squinting at her, he said, "Do you understand now? Yanran, you need me." Gu Yanran smiled and praised him. "Xian, I didn't expect you to be so amazing. I really misjudged you in the past." "You didn't misjudge me. It's not too late to return to my side now." Yi Xian moved closer but saw that Gu Yanran was obviously avoiding him. His eyes dimmed and he slowly sat back down. Gu Yanran smoothed her hair and smiled at him seductively. "Xian, I really admire your abilities. You shouldn't be a shady person. I don't care. As long as I can be by your side, I'm willing to do anything." Yi Xian looked at Gu Yanran passionately. She was his goddess and his salvation. She had saved his life and become his spiritual support. It was impossible for him to leave her. Gu Yanran shook her head. "Xian, I want to train you and make you the most capable person under me. Our relationship will hinder you in the future." "I don't care. But I do." Gu Yanran's chest rose and fell and her face flushed. "Xian, are you not going to listen to me anymore?" Yi Xian couldn't resist Gu Yanran's words. He held his head with both hands and struggled in pain for a long time before finally nodding. He half knelt in front of Gu Yanran and kissed the back of her hand. "As you wish, Your Majesty." He knew that this meant they couldn't maintain this physical relationship anymore. After finally persuading Yi Xian, Gu Yanran finally said to him, "Okay, where do you live? I'll introduce my sister to you in 2 days." "Your sister?" Yi Xian was confused. "Your sister was found?" "Yes, I found her. She's already 18 years old and so beautiful. Even if you saw her in person, you wouldn't be able to recognize her as my sister." Gu Yanran made a face at him. "I heard my sister is also a genius. You two might have a common language." "That fat and spoiled girl?" Yi Xian snorted. "Who wants to have a common language with her?" Gu Yanran smiled but didn't say anything. Huo Xiaoheng drove Gu Nianji back to school. He parked the car in the temporary parking lot in front of her dorm building and waited for her to get her bag so they could study together. This kind of experience was quite novel for Huo Xiaoheng. He had enlisted not long after entering university, and most of his credits were self-study. His time at school was limited. Now that he was going to study with Gu Nianji, it was like reliving his university days. They arrived at a school by the lake in B University. It was around 11 a.m. on a Sunday, so there were fewer people in the school building. Gu Nianji found an empty classroom and walked in with Huo Xiaoheng. "This is the classroom where we law students take our classes." Gu Nianji pointed at the podium. "Professor, he has a class here once a month and it's always packed." Huo Xiaoheng smiled and didn't say anything else. He picked up his phone and began to deal with work. Gu Nianji took out her laptop and began to do her own work. The number of students in the classroom gradually increased, and curious gazes kept looking at where Gu Nianji and Huo Xiaoheng were sitting. The dainty and quick-witted young girl and the breathtakingly handsome mature man sat side by side. Although the two of them did not speak much, they would occasionally raise their eyes to look at each other. That kind of tacit understanding was like a wall, isolating others from the outside and only the two of them within the wall. They had to show off their affection during a Sunday self-study session. That was enough. More and more eyes were looking at them and they were getting hotter and hotter. Gu Nianji was the first to lose it. She hurriedly turned off her computer and whispered to Huo Xiaoheng, "Huo Xiao, can we go now?" Huo Xiaoheng looked up at her and said slowly, "You don't want to study anymore?" Gu Nianji was speechless. Her face hurt. What should she do? This was the first 3,000-word update, a reminder to everyone about the monthly votes and recommendation votes. There would be an additional update at 7 p.m. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.